Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel, YLS it Invincible. Chapter 61. Hey, did you hear that? What? General Wells was actually defeated. I didn't expect that he was actually a bad guy who pretended to be a public servant for personal gain. TCH, how long ago did you hear this news? I recently heard rumors that he might be an addict. In the school, even some students who had never paid much attention to politics knew about Wells, which shows the wide scope of the publicity of this matter. What kind of antiques are you? You still pay attention to the news that only adults watch. What we young people should pay attention to is the recent popular Spider-Man. That's right, TCH. What's Spider-Man? Iron Man is the coolest thing. On the Midtown campus, Robert walked leisurely through the crowd, walking towards his class while listening to various news from the crowd. Hi Robert. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder. When he turned around, he saw that the person was Peter Parker. Well, you seem to be in a good mood today. Robert smiled and said to the legendary Spider-Man, that it was already more than 6 months later, and many of the previous things had been settled. Today is Robert's first day back at school. It's not that he is too arrogant to go to school after kicking the White House, but because of the Ancient One, the Supreme Mage. Thinking of this name, Robert couldn't help but recall the scene when the Ancient One came to his door shortly after he touched the Time Stone. Ancient One, say your purpose. Robert, who was still sleeping, opened his eyes in confusion, and then immediately woke up. After all, an extremely dangerous person appeared in front of him, and he happened to have offended her before. It is estimated that not many people can stay calm at this time. What purpose could I have? His whole body was once again covered with power of space, and Robert rushed into the gate of space. He opened again in a flash, and the Ancient One had no time to stop him during the whole process. HMPH. Then let me have some fun with you. The Ancient One was also really angry this time. Robert touched such a precious thing as the Time Stone, and he must have an explanation for what he seemed to want to destroy the United States before. The Supreme Mage Ancient One will never allow such a threat to exist on Earth, and she has made up her mind to fight Robert to the end. Robert wandered around the Earth, including polar island glaciers, Gobi deserts, tropical rainforests. He went everywhere, but he couldn't stop the Ancient One from tracking him. What on earth do you want to do? Finally, after running away for almost a month, Robert couldn't bear it anymore in a no-man's land. He yelled at the Ancient One who was sticking to him like a dog-skin plaster. Ancient One, you can't calm down now. She came to Robert leisurely, like a predator catching its prey, smiling like a winner. Have you convinced me? Robert's eyes narrowed. He was already murderous. After all, being chased for more than a month and sleeping in the open air every day would make a person's mentality collapse. Ancient One, stop talking nonsense and do it. After saying that, she took the lead in launching an attack. Layers of golden energy appeared around her. She first tentatively hit Robert with physical attacks. Snort. With a cold snort, Robert was not afraid at all because he was protected by the power of space, and just faced the fireball created by the Ancient One with magic. Really, after seeing that Robert would not be harmed by the fireball at all, the Ancient One was more certain of her judgment in her heart, and she quickly changed tactics with her rich experience. Min. A curse sounded, and Robert, who was about to fight the Ancient One in close combat, immediately stopped and did not dare to take another step forward. This was a technique similar to a mental attack. Robert originally thought that by blocking the sound in the space, he would not be attacked, but the result was beyond his expectation. Even if no sound reaches his ears, Robert will still be mentally harmed as the Ancient One opens and closes his mouth to chant the spell. So this is your weakness. Seeing Robert's painful expression, Ancient One couldn't help but feel reassured. What she wanted to do now was to control him first and then ask everything she wanted to know. You wanna die? Since blocking the propagation of sound was useless, Robert simply put all his energy into dealing with Ancient One, leaving only a little physical defense behind, and he directly activated 1/10 of the total space power that could be mobilized to deal with the Ancient One. If it weren't for the fear of destroying the Earth, Robert might be able to use 100% of his strength. Visible to the naked eye, the surrounding space has become sticky. If an ordinary person came here, it would be difficult to move a finger, but Ancient One can still move inside, but her crisis is not those sticky spaces. HMPH. I wonder if you can withstand the space crack. Robert, who was already angry, is too lazy to talk about martial arts anymore. Now all his moves are directly directed at the Ancient One, such as space crack, space blade, space teleportation. Even Ancient One, who is the supreme archmage, can't bear so many attacks. You must know that no matter how strong she is, she cannot survive unharmed under the power of space. Bang! The Ancient One was imprisoned in a space, and Robert was outputting energy outside. The Ancient One, who had regained his composure, also began to dodge and resist attacks while launching a mental attack on Robert. You're playing with me, right? Come on then. The current state of both sides is that neither one can do anything to the other. If Robert and Ancient One want to win now, they can only place their hope on the other party's energy being exhausted first. This situation is undoubtedly what Robert wants to see because his energy is basically endless. In his opinion, the Ancient One's consumption of him can only lead to one result, which is failure. But what Robert didn't know was that the Ancient One also had the same idea. Fortunately, the conflict between the two took place in no man's land. If it were a war of this level in a city, it would be enough to destroy a large city and 3/4 of its population. You are stronger than I expected. More than 2 months have passed, and Robert and the Ancient One have maintained this state. The Ancient One couldn't help but say at first, "But you are weaker than I thought." Robert thought she was about to die, so he quickly increased the output. He originally only used 1/10 of the force but quickly increased it to 2/10. Snort. A muffled sound came out that Ancient One was injured, but as expected of the Supreme Mage, she quickly stabilized her figure and continued to fight Robert. The mental attack was also gradually strengthening. Robert also realized at this time that the Ancient One had a backup plan, but seeing it injured with his own eyes just now made him convinced that the Ancient One would not be able to hold on for long. Another 2 months have passed. Why do you act like you can't be killed? Robert was about to collapse. At this time, his energy output was close to 4/10, but Ancient One was still able to withstand it. Robert, who controls the power of space, can perceive that if he further strengthens the energy, the power of space will overflow. Just like a bucket, no man's land is a bucket, and the power of space is water. When the bucket is full, the water will naturally overflow. Enough. After experiencing a stalemate for several months, Ancient One finally couldn't bear it anymore, because she didn't see any loss from Robert, but she suffered a lot of losses herself. Bang! Seeing that the attrition tactic was not working and that Robert was extremely difficult to deal with, Ancient One simply took out the trump card, Time Stone. Under the urging of the Ancient One, the Time Stone, hanging around her neck immediately illuminated a green light, aiming directly at Robert. I'm sorry. Of course he was not stupid, and he immediately dodged aside, but the Ancient One did not intend to give up. No matter how Robert tried to avoid it, he was eventually illuminated by the light of the gem, but nothing happened. What? The Ancient One looked at Robert with shock on her face. This was her first time using the gem and she failed. Ancient One, you have other gems on you. It seems that your thing is of no use to me anymore. After seeing that the Time Stone was ineffective against him, Robert stopped dodging and just stood there straight. He did not answer the Ancient One's question directly. For 10 minutes, after using various methods to activate the gems to no avail, Ancient One compromised. Ancient One, maybe we can talk. After seeing that he could not subdue Robert, the Ancient One turned to look for another way to understand the situation. A few months passed, and Robert's mood had already calmed down. He didn't want to waste time with the Ancient One, so the two immediately called a truce and reached an agreement after talking about everything. That night at Tony's house. Oh, Robert. When Robert opened the space door and came here, Tony happened to be in the laboratory. It's been a long time since I last saw you. It seems like your condition is pretty bad. What did he see when he came back? Tony was lifting his clothes and looking at the many black stripes on his chest through the display screen in front of him. Tony. It's nothing. Where have you been recently? Quickly putting down his clothes, Tony pretended to be nonchalant and tried to change the subject. You don't look like there's nothing wrong with you. Robert walked up to Tony and looked closely, and found that there were faint black stripes on his neck. Tony, it's really not. Palladium poisoning. This thing is saving my life, but the substance that maintains its energy wants my life. Dang. Seeing that he couldn't deal with Robert, Tony had no choice but to confess, and while talking, he knocked on the reactor on his chest. Robert opened his mouth and actually wanted to tell Tony about Howard's discovery of the new element earlier, but after thinking about it he decided not to do that. Everything will be okay. After patting Tony's shoulder, Robert said firmly. After Tony didn't see the look of pity on the other person's face, his expression relaxed, and then he took another sip of green liquid, and then a gloomy look appeared on his face. In 6 months, he tried all possible methods, but none of them worked. However, in response to the encouragement from Robert, the only insider, he still managed to cheer up and replied. Well, I think it will get better too. He could see Tony's frustration, but Robert still felt that this was a rare experience. Perhaps there would be no real Iron Man in the future without experiencing a life-and-death crisis, so he didn't say more. Jarvis, if you knew you were going to die, what would you do? After watching Robert's leaving back and making sure he couldn't hear, Tony asked Jarvis. Robert, Peter looked at him doubtfully, obviously not knowing why he was in a daze. After being called, Robert quickly came to his senses, smiled and walked towards the teaching building with Peter. I am Iron Man. As soon as he walked to the place where hot news is usually broadcast, the part where Tony admitted that he was Iron Man was playing on the TV. Robert looked at it. It seems that a lot of things happened during my absence. Very handsome, right? In fact, I also think that Mr. Stark not only invented the space shuttle, but he is also Iron Man. This is simply awesome. Peter also saw the news on TV. Although he had said the same thing many times to different people, he obviously didn't mind repeating it again in front of Robert. It's pretty cool. Robert smiled and replied. He originally thought that after he caused the incident, Tony failed to shoot down an F-22, thus losing the chance to be discovered by the public, resulting in the loss of the most classic part. But obviously Tony is not a person who can sit idle. Even if he doesn't have the record of shooting down the F-22, he can still make everyone pay attention to him with his own ability. Maybe it's the correction of this world. Robert thought in his mind, and then laughed with Peter and prepared to leave, but a piece of related news behind him successfully caught his attention. Affected by this news, Stark's stock price rose by 2 percentage points. Oops. After hearing the news, Robert suddenly thought that he had bought $6 billion in shares of Stark Company before. What's wrong? Peter looked at Robert, who suddenly picked up his phone to check and was very confused. Why did Robert become a little weird after taking a long vacation? And he was still thinking to himself, oh, no, it's okay. How strange. What did he see in his eyes? The skyrocketing stock price of Stark. It had risen at least 5 times. In other words, the previous $6 billion was now a huge sum of $30 billion. Peter, oh, let's go quickly, we'll be late for class soon. While agreeing, Robert's attention was always on his mobile phone and he was busy selling stocks. Even after entering the classroom, his eyes were always on his mobile phone. As for just now, he was actually scanning the direction of Peter with his peripheral vision and letting him lead him. You came. Suddenly he felt himself being hugged. Robert looked up and found that it was Belinda. At this time, her eyes were a little red and her face was full of excitement. No, Tony, that's too dangerous. Pepper persuaded Tony from the side. Just last night, for some reason, he suddenly decided to watch the car race. Now, after arriving at the scene, he got wind of something and insisted on driving the car by himself. Trust me, okay. Tony picked up the helmet and put it on his head. Although his words seemed to be asking, they also had an unquestionable flavor. After all, Pepper was still just an employee he hired and could not stop him forcibly. Oh, he's so charming. Justin. What? Oh, you said Tony. I know him very well, you know. Seeing that the beautiful reporter who was originally here to interview him was actually attracted to Tony on the TV, Justin was actually very angry. But in words, he wanted to flatter Tony to show his extraordinariness, as if he had completely forgotten the scene he had targeted Tony at the hearing. Justin, Tony is great, but I guess this is my interview, right? I think you know what I mean. After seeing that the beauty in front of him was completely attracted by Tony and ignored him at all, Justin couldn't help but emphasize the interview. Female reporter. I understand. But can I excuse you now? But what was unexpected was that the female reporter was completely focused on how to interview Tony. As for Justin, she was left hanging there naturally. HMPH. Tony. Looking at the figure hurriedly away, Justin gritted his teeth and said, in fact, he has been living in the shadow of the other party. In the past, when Tony was in power, Justin didn't dare to make mistakes, but now that he has a stalemate with the military over the issue of the steel suit, the situation is different. The race is about to start. All cars please enter the track. 3, 2, 1. Boom. With several engine roars, the car driven by Tony rushed out together with the other contestants. Oh my goodness. Whenever he went to a dangerous place, Pepper would always cover his eyes and not dare to look. We have to find a way to stop Tony. He has no training at all, and it is very easy to cause accidents like this. Happy watched in horror from the side. After seeing Tony take risks and get away with it again and again, he said to Pepper. Pepper. I have tried to persuade him before, but you also know Tony's character. I can't persuade him at all. Happy. We can't do it, but maybe one person can. Midtown High School. Robert and Belinda were sitting together. The girl was a little frightened after not seeing him for several months. Now that they were sitting together like this, they could feel a little safer. Belinda, seriously, you actually, well, you don't need to hold me so tightly. Being hugged by a beautiful woman should originally be a very comfortable thing, but if the timeline of this comfortable thing is stretched, that may not necessarily be the case. Robert was just about to forcefully pull away the hand that had been held for more than an hour when he was suddenly stared at by a pitiful look. My hands are a little numb. Why don't you change seats and change your arms? In the end, he relented and decided to go with the girl. Good, Belinda said happily. Ring ring ring. Suddenly, a phone rang, and class was in progress. The teacher on the stage originally heard the sound of the phone and wanted to subconsciously train the students, but when he saw whose phone was ringing, he chose silence. I'm going to take a call. Belinda had just finished changing seats, and the other hand that was holding Robert was about to be released, and she seemed a little reluctant. Be good, okay. Lifting up the numb hand just now, Robert gently coaxed Belinda like a child and rubbed her hand. All right. Belinda seemed very well behaved at this time, and Robert pinched her tender face and decided to reward her tonight. Then he hurriedly left the classroom, and Robert picked up the call just as the phone was about to hang up automatically. Hello, Robert, this is Pepper, can you come here? Tony doesn't know what he went through last night, and now he seems to want to die. Where are you? Monaco, just behind the famous Paris hotel, is holding a racing competition here, and Tony is also participating, but he has never received any training before. Pepper told him the location and situation, and Robert almost knew what happened. It was just that Tony had completely lost hope and wanted to let himself go. Okay, I understand. I'll go there when I find the exact coordinates. Although he knew Tony's situation, since Pepper had come to ask for help, Robert couldn't refuse, so he agreed. Monaco, racing scene. Everyone is chasing each other. Oh, what an exciting game. The host at the competition was explaining passionately, but the next second he couldn't get excited anymore. Ah, wait, something special happened. A staff member entered the arena and took off his helmet. What did he want to do? As soon as the host finished speaking, the intruder answered him with practical actions. He pulled out 2 energy whips from his body. As the energy flowed, the overalls he was wearing were burned, revealing the reactor on his chest. Bang! A racing car happened to be passing by at this time. The man raised his hand and whipped the unlucky racing car into 2 halves. God! Ah! Emergency! Security! Where are the security? The competition scene was instantly chaotic. Screams and shouts resounded in the audience, and many people were scared away. Oh my goodness! Pepper looked at the live broadcast in front of her and was immediately frightened. Harry on the side reacted quickly and took out the portable suit that Tony had recently improved. Quick, let's go. As quickly as possible, Harry and Pepper got into the Rolls-Royce they came from. They drove directly into the arena and drove in the opposite direction on the track to look for Tony. Buzz. Boom. Of course they couldn't meet Tony along the way, because he had been caught at this time. The front of Tony's car was split into two halves by a whip. Fortunately, the car did not explode while rolling. He only suffered some injuries and even a concussion, but his life was saved. What the hell? Seeing the man with the whip approaching him, Tony quickly took off his helmet and struggled to get out of the overturned car. The man's target was obviously Tony. He walked towards him step by step and a feeling of oppression instantly swept through Tony's body. Buzz. Another whip struck, and the cab where Tony was sitting was split into two. Fortunately, the others escaped before that, otherwise the car would not just be in two halves now. When Tony made a sneak attack on the person who wanted to kill him from behind, and hit him hard on the head with the metal parts of the racing car. Bang! However, because the force was too small, it failed to knock the opponent out. Instead, it angered him. The person just picked up the whip and gave him a few blows. Tony dodged several times in a row, but failed to do so. It was obvious that the other party did this intentionally, as if he was teasing his prey. Ha ha ha, run away, Tony. Aren't you usually very impressive, Stark? The man was very happy with this kind of crushing, so he pumped out a few more times, not for any other reason than to have more fun. You look really embarrassed. I really want to see you all my life, but it's a pity that it's all over. Bang! Just when he was about to deal with Tony, Pepper and Happy drove up in time, and Happy kicked the accelerator and slammed the man into the guardrail beside the track. Phew! After spitting out a mouthful of black blood, he actually didn't suffer much damage, but still had the strength to swing the whip again. Tony. Hit him with more gas. Happy. You should have seen it. I'm doing it. He has stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, but still can't stop the opponent from cracking the whip. Puff. The car body was divided into two parts from the middle, just at this moment. Ring ring ring. Pepper's cell phone rang. After checking the contact, she forced herself to calm down and answered the call. Hey, Pepper, where are you? I'm at the door of the Paris hotel. Robert's voice came from the other side, and Tony also heard his voice on Pepper's side. Tony, you came at the right time, and you actually had the opportunity to collect our bodies. Okay, Pepper, don't expect Robert to come right away, give me the box quickly. Ha ha ha, you want a box? It seems like that's a good thing. Seeing that Tony was still paying attention to the red box at this time, the attacker immediately realized that it was an important thing. It's no wonder that the villain died because of too much talking. He solved Tony once and for all and everything was successful, but the attacker insisted on delaying it. He didn't remember to regret it until a blue light covered the entire radius of 100 miles. Tisk. It seems I'm not too late. Robert flew around in the sky and finally found the location of Tony and the others. At this time, a scene that seemed horrifying to ordinary people was taking place on the ground. Within 100 miles, all objects except Robert stopped moving, and everything was at rest except time. This situation cannot last long. After finding Tony, he, Pepper, and Happy were brought to a safe distance, and then Robert lifted the space restriction. Just like the name, everything just now was just the stasis of space instead of time. If it lasted for a long time, it would cause many problems, so Robert did not let this situation continue for too long. Pepper. Happy. What just happened? Tony. Another of your abilities. That's right. Among the three, Tony was the only one who knew Robert's strength, so he didn't show any surprise. Oh my god, there must be a ghost here. Run quickly. Due to Robert's hand just now, a bigger commotion broke out in the audience. Although everyone's movements were restricted just now, their thinking was not, so everyone experienced and remembered the feeling of being unable to move. Just thinking about another glowing stick, like the one in Men in Black. Robert looked at the panicked crowd and murmured that he wished he could delete the memories of these people now, because there were more or less people who watched him move freely and fall from the sky just now. You seem to be having a great time chatting. The name of the person who attacked Tony was Ivan. He felt that he had been ignored at the moment. He only had revenge in his eyes and didn't care about how he felt unable to move. Now he only has one target, and that is Tony. PFF'd. Ivan waved two long whips and walked towards Robert, Tony and the other four people. He saw that the places on the ground that had just been in contact with the whips were left with deep marks. It can be imagined that these things were hit on the ground. The feeling on my body. Forehead. A blue energy suddenly emerged from Robert's hand, and Ivan fell into a state of being unable to move again. This guy talks a lot of nonsense. Robert looked at Ivan speechlessly. For this kind of villain who always chatters when he sees the protagonist, he came to the theory that the other party deserved to fail. Robert let him go. This is a battle between me and him. At this time, Tony didn't know what was going on, so he insisted on taking the armor from Pepper, and then asked Robert to let go of Ivan, so as to start a battle that had already stopped. Then let's stand far away. Pepper. Tony. Happy. He has a mind of his own. Taking Happy and Pepper into the auditorium, Tony also changed into his armor at this time, and then he waved to Robert. Pepper almost always looked back every step of the way, which showed that she was really worried about Tony, especially after Robert let go of his restraint on Ivan. She kept a close eye on him. Happy is much more relaxed next to him. Firstly, he believes in the strength of Tony's armor. Secondly, because Robert is also here, there is no possibility of losing at all. Okay. Are you a god? On Robert's side, a group of people gathered around him. They were the same people who had just watched him fall from the sky and saw him take action. Looking at the countless onlookers in front of him, Robert decided to stabilize them first. A piece of space energy hit them, and those people were all immobilized, while he himself made a phone call. Hello, Fury, if I remember correctly, your shield has bases all over the world, right? Nick. Fury. Theoretically, that's the case, but it also depends on the specific location. Where did you encounter any trouble? After telling Fury the location, Robert sat there and waited for the shield people to help him deal with it. After all, this is what they professionally do. Under the auditorium, the battle between Tony and Ivan ended with the one without armor lying down. Just when Ivan fell to the ground, a group of policemen with live ammunition arrived. They had to admire the country's efficiency in doing things. They refused to show up when there was danger. After the danger was resolved, they always arrived on time. This is professionalism. Robert looked at the Moroccan policeman below and gave a very vivid evaluation. If nothing happens, I have to leave. There are still people waiting for me. Robert saw that Tony had taken off his armor and came over, so he simply went to meet him. After telling him the situation, he didn't bother to wait for his nod and went back to Midtown High School. Why did it take so long? As soon as she sat back in her seat, Belinda hugged him and asked Robert with a bit of resentment. Oh, I had nothing to do and helped me dispose of some garbage. Belinda believed Robert's nonchalant attitude. Although she didn't think that he really went to take out the garbage, it was probably just a minor matter, so she didn't ask further. But what she didn't know was that what Robert thought was a trivial matter and what she thought were two different concepts. Pentagon. Just now our allies reported that in Morocco, with the Paris hotel as the center, all objects within a radius of 100 miles are unable to move. This has caused panic within a certain range. An intelligence agent reported the situation. Freeman and the U.S. generals above, as well as the re-elected President Lytton and Defense Secretary Norton who participated in the emergency meeting via video, were all silent. Okay, you go out first. It was Freeman who spoke first, and the intelligence agent also knew that he couldn't listen to what happened next, so he simply withdrew. To summarize all the information, 1. Tony Stark was attacked in Morocco. The opponent was a madman who controlled the miniaturization of the reactor. 2. SHIELD's information showed that Robert had appeared there and asked them to send people from the base to help him deal with some things. 3. Just now our allies reported a strange situation near the Paris hotel. Freeman summarized the 3 pieces of information. All those present were senior military officials. They all knew about the incident of Robert breaking into the White House. His ability to come out safely in the end was inseparable from his unparalleled strength. I originally thought he wanted to keep a low profile for a while. U.S. President Lytton participated in this meeting via video link. At this time, he was sighing on the other end of the video. Yes, the past few months when Robert disappeared made these senior executives think that he was taking a low-key rest. After all, He had demonstrated the power to destroy the United States twice before. Combined with the time when he suddenly disappeared, people naturally thought that he was recovering from his injuries. How could they have imagined that there could still be someone in the world who had been fighting with Robert for several months? Freeman. Since he appears again now, it proves that Robert has recovered, and some people in the government should also stop thinking. Lytton. I think they will. Many people tried to find Robert when he disappeared, because these people thought that he was in a weak stage, otherwise there would be no need to hide, so they wanted to find him and get rid of him quickly. Freeman also did a lot of things to Jozon. Firstly, he didn't want these people to find Robert, and secondly, he was afraid that Robert would know that these people were looking for him. Because that is likely to cause a disaster to sweep across the United States, but now everything has settled with the appearance of Robert himself. After all, if he dares to come out, it proves that he is sure. Moroccan Police Department. Ivan, your parents were thieves and robbers, and you were born into such a family. Tony, thief. Then whose technology did you steal from? Ivan, that was my father's. And your father stole it. Tony looked at Ivan's face. He didn't understand why the other party said that to him. Looks like I need to check when I get back. Tony made up his mind and was about to turn around and leave, but Ivan laughed loudly after he was about to leave. Ha ha ha, you have already lost Tony. When I can make God bleed, people will no longer believe that he is omnipotent. Just wait, the sharks at the bottom of the sea can smell the smell of blood from far away and swim over to you, eating you up to nothing. Tony, don't worry about it, because even if you're right, what's the point? They won't let you, the prisoner, watch TV. Ivan, don't be too happy. You should know that palladium can cause poisoning. His words directly hit Tony's pain point, causing him to pause, and then left at an even faster pace. Don't worry about it. Before leaving the interrogation room, Tony said one last word, but in Ivan's eyes, it felt like Tony was unable to cope with it. Ha ha ha, I'm here to watch you get swallowed up, or die directly. Jingle bell. The bell rang for the end of Get Out of Class. Robert's body was numb, so he simply stood up and moved around. He walked to Peter, only to find that he was the only one working hard there today. Peter, where is Harry? Why haven't you seen him for a long time? Are you on long leave? In the past, Harry was usually by Peter's side at this time, either asking questions or chatting for fun, but today he was nowhere to be seen. Harry. Peter looked up, and when he said the name, a sad look began to appear in his eyes. Harry dropped out of school, it seems because his father's company went bankrupt. Robert was confused about Peter's expression, and he didn't know until Belinda explained it next to him. Hey, life is unpredictable. Robert had basically guessed what was going on, patted Peter's shoulder to express comfort, and then retreated to the nearest seat. Hey, how many things have I missed in the past few months? Belinda, there are quite a few. For example, you missed my mother when she was discharged from hospital. She didn't know what Robert was talking about, so she subconsciously thought he was talking to her. Oh, that really shouldn't be the case. I couldn't help but be entangled by others in those days and couldn't get away. This was Robert's first explanation after returning, and it quickly caught Belinda's attention. Belinda, who is that person? Male or female? Female. Robert said subconsciously, and saw a cloud of mist quickly forming in Belinda's eyes, which turned out to be a sign that she was about to cry. But she's old enough to be my grandma. Just as he was busy explaining, Robert lied a little. In fact, it would not be a problem for him to be his ancestor based on the age of the Ancient One. Well, cough. I hate it, please finish your sentence next time. Belinda's sad mood didn't last for a few seconds before she immediately laughed at Robert's next words. You know, you look so beautiful when you smile. Robert looked at Belinda's smile and was stunned at first, and then he felt a feeling of favor rising in his heart, making him couldn't help but reach out and touch the girl's face. Yeah, I'm in the classroom. Belinda was at a loss by the other party's move. Her face quickly turned red because Robert's eyes looked so familiar to her now. Robert. Well, there are a lot of people, let's go back. The girl responded with a low-pitched voice and immediately lowered her head, as if she was afraid that something shameful would be known. Night is coming quietly, but what is different from the past is that there seem to be many people busy. In the house that Robert bought for Belinda and the others, together with Belinda's mother, the three of them had a sumptuous dinner together. Originally, Robert wanted to go out to eat, euphemistically calling it, catching the wind and washing away the dust, but Belinda was unwilling to do so, as if it would save him a lot of money. However, Robert still wanted to reward her for this, so the chirping of birds continued all night. That night in New York, in a private hangar. Justin. Hey, look. Look who's here. Isn't that my idol? Ivan's hood was lifted, and the bright light made him a little uncomfortable for a moment, but it didn't last long before he could clearly see the surrounding environment. Look what you have done. How can you handcuff my idol? Untie him quickly. Ivan slowly came to Justin. When he saw the handcuffs in his hand, Justin pretended to ask. But sir, he is in danger. Are you sure you want to untie him? The police officer in charge of the escort asked Justin hesitantly. He had seen how powerful Ivan was, so he gave a kind reminder. Justin. Oh, of course. You still have to ask. Untie him quickly. He is not a beast, there is no need to be so nervous. The bribed police officer. Okay. Since the employer insisted on doing this, he couldn't say anything more and could only open the handcuffs obediently. That's right, come and have a seat. Ivan's handcuffs were opened, and Justin coyly pulled out a chair for him while letting people serve food. Top-grade salmon fillets, please eat, I have everything you need here. But I prefer desserts before meals. I like sweets. This is also a high-end product flown from abroad. Justin's words conveyed a message to Ivan in every way, that is, he has money and a lot of money. Justin. How is it? I think you have seen my resources to a certain extent. As he spoke, he turned sideways to show the full view of his private jet, showing off like a nouveau riche, but he didn't even know it. You have ability and I have abundant resources. You and Tony are inferior in this respect, and I want to make up for your shortcomings. Are you interested in collaborating? Justin thought he was very cool and waved the wine glass in his hand towards Ivan, wanting to invite him. Ivan. Haha, idiot. What he said in Russian, of course Justin, who had no translation, couldn't understand it. What? Maybe you can speak English. If you can't, I can also find a top translator. Believe me, it will be fast. Looking at Ivan in front of him, although Justin had no favorable impression of him and was even a little disgusted, in order to get the same reactor technology he had with Tony Stark, he decided to trick him into cooperating first. Ivan. No need to translate, deal done. Justin wanted to take advantage of him, and why didn't Ivan have the same idea? Justin. Oh, really? That's great. I heard that you and Tony seem to have some issues, right? It just so happens that he and I also have some troubles. There will definitely be a lot of common topics between us. God knows how excited Justin Hammer is now. He seems to have seen the technology of reactor miniaturization waving to him. Ivan. There is more than just a conflict between me and him. Emphasizing this point, he then made a request that left Justin confused. I need my bird to keep me company while I work. Justin. Your bird. Bird from Russia. Ivan. I want my bird. Suddenly he seemed angry. Justin quickly agreed. Oh, no problem, I will find it for you, your bird, it's very simple. After receiving the answer, Ivan's mood returned to normal, and he started to eat the salmon fillet in front of him, finishing it in almost 2 bites. Give him more quickly. Justin had noticed Ivan's eating speed. Although he was disgusted with it, he still chose to endure it for the sake of long-term considerations. At the same time, Tony's house in California. What would you do if you were to die tomorrow? Tony asked the new assistant. Her beauty made Tony very fond of her. Although he was still a little defensive in his heart, he couldn't help but ask her when he was alone. However, even Tony, who has great powers, does not know that what he is looking at is Natasha Romanoff, who has long been famous in the world. She also has another more famous name, Black Widow. Natasha Romanoff. If I were that person who was dying, I would do whatever I wanted to do before I died. I think so too. After getting the answer he wanted, Tony became more open-minded. In other words, he was now more unscrupulous. I have to attend the birthday party tonight in person. With that said, Tony walked to the laboratory on the next floor. Natasha Romanoff originally wanted to follow him tentatively, but unfortunately she didn't have permission. Sorry, you have no right to enter here. Sorry. Jarvis's voice sounded nearby, and Natasha Romanoff snorted unwillingly. She actually had the ability to forcefully enter, but that would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. Ouch. Get high. Okay. Where is Mr. Stark? He sent me an invitation to my birthday party, but where is he? Look in the sky, he's coming. At Tony's house, the birthday party he announced at short notice also had a large number of people vying to attend, especially various socialites who wanted to reach the sky in one fell swoop. Tony. I thought I heard someone calling me just now. When, posing a handsome landing pose, Tony appeared on the stage wearing a steel armor, which will undoubtedly detonate the scene. Ah, Tony, I love you. He is so handsome, I must marry him. Go away, I was the one who came here first, and if you want to get married, I will get married first. If you don't take a pee and look at yourselves, will Mr. Stark take a fancy to you? The endless shouting, jealousy, flattery and other sounds around him reached Tony's ears, which greatly benefited him. What is Tony doing? Are you crazy? We have to find a way to stop him. Pepper was also in the crowd at this time, and her current cheerful mood was exactly the opposite of Tony's. At this moment, she was hearing the voices around her that she defined as vixens, and it could be said that she was burning with anger. Something called jealousy happened to Pepper, and she, who had already regarded herself as half a hostess, wished she could drive away all the women here except herself. Happy. He is wearing armor. I don't want to mess with him at this time. But I want to try it. Happy. What? He thought who was being so arrogant, but when he turned around and saw Rhodes with a stinky face, he swallowed all the subsequent taunts. Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes, Tony's good friend, Tony exposed his suit when Robert disappeared. People in the government and the military wanted to get this technology, but Tony did not want to cooperate with them. Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes played a major role in allowing Tony to live a leisurely life without being forced in by the army to take away the steel suit. But when Rhodes came to attend Tony's birthday party and saw him wearing a steel suit and performing like a joker on the stage, no one knew how angry he was, and not many people knew that he had resisted these days. How much pressure. Rod. It's time for this to end. Seeing an angry Rhodes preparing to rush to the stage to have a conflict with Tony, Pepper was worthy of being a person who only cared for Tony. Even if she was jealous now, she wanted to help him block some of Rhodes' anger. Pepper. I think Tony is a little drunk. Wait a minute and I'll persuade him to come down. Pepper's words made Rhodes stop temporarily, but that was only temporary. He was still very angry, so his next tone was a bit harsh. Rod. Then he better hurry up. Pepper. I'll try my best. Come on, how about throwing that thing into the sky? I'll show you the power of this thing. Tony said to the famous lady in the audience who wanted to flatter him. At this time, she was holding a bottle of champagne in her hand, but Tony asked her to throw it into the air. Okay. The socialite didn't do any ink. She winked at Tony and quickly threw the champagne into the air. Bang, bang. After a short period of energy accumulation, Tony fired a cannon from his palm, and the champagne flying in the air exploded. The spilled wine fell into the crowd, making them even more excited. Tony. How about one more? Bang. As if he was addicted to playing, the palm of his hand began to charge again, allowing people in the crowd to continue throwing champagne into the sky for him to crush. I'm coming. I'm coming. Wait a moment. Okay. Wait a moment. Pepper's voice suddenly sounded. She had already asked the DJ to turn off the music from behind, and then walked to the stage to stop the carnival people and Tony. You're drunk, Tony. Please stop messing around, okay? Rod is very angry now. Let me help you go to bed. It won't be too late to start the party after you sober up. Pepper persuaded Tony in his ear, and he nodded obediently at first. After Pepper relaxed a little, his attitude changed. Are Miss Pepper and someone, want to end this party, burp. Tony seemed to have had too much to drink, and it was difficult for him to speak, but he was still stubborn and wanted to finish what he said. Quote. Since there are some people who don't want to participate, let's ask you out, hiccup, just like Miss Pepper. Come on, let's continue. Bang. After Tony finished the call, he turned around and started the champagne drinking activity, and also motioned to the DJ behind him to play music. As several champagne bottles were broken, the patience of Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes below also broke. Tony, I'm so. Pepper had nothing to say, so she simply went out to stay out of sight and out of mind. Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes had already arrived at the laboratory. He looked at the stacked generations of steel armor and immediately walked over. Authentication successful. As Jarvis's voice sounded for the last time, Rhodes completely took over control of the current generation suit he was wearing, and Jarvis's intelligent control was automatically deleted. Tony, I love you. Hit this. In the hall of Tony's villa, the birthday party was still going on, and the ladies fell into an even crazier stage of showing their love. Some of them were no longer satisfied with throwing wine bottles, but wanted to move closer to Robert. Suddenly, when the atmosphere at the scene reached its peak, there was a sound of metal hitting the ground, and Rhodes, who had already put on the steel suit, landed with an ugly face. Rhodes, get out immediately, I will only say the same thing once. Quote. Bang. There was a moment of silence at first, and some people were not even sure if Rhodes was joking, but everyone knew it when Rhodes pointed the energy cannon in his palm at them. Oh my God. Don't kill me, leave right away. Run. The scene experienced a brief period of chaos, but 5 minutes later when almost everyone left, the hall suddenly became clear. Can you play some louder music for me and my brother? Tony said to the DJ who was hiding behind him, but he actually listened to him and put on the music. Enough. Seeing that Tony was still in the mood to play, Rod Rage rushed forward and prepared to take off Tony's armor. You, a drunkard, don't deserve to wear it, take it off for me. While Rhodes was talking, he also took action. He tried to take off Tony's armor with his hands, but the result was obviously unsuccessful. Apparently it has different ideas than you. Tony laughed and started teasing his good brother Rhodes, but the other man didn't seem to be in the mood to joke with him at this time. Then I'll break it and take it off for you. Rhodes gave up his fearless attempt and began to look for another way to solve the problem, that is, absolute violence. Boom. The two manipulators in steel suits fought, and the power was astonishing. Even Pepper, who was standing not far away, was frightened by the sight, fearing that Tony would be hurt. Someone has to stop this. As she spoke, she remembered her experience earlier today, when Robert's fall from the sky left a deep impression on her. Doo-doo. Happy on the side didn't even have a chance to speak, and Pepper had already called out. At Robert's home, the sudden ringing of the phone seemed very inappropriate. Your phone rang. But it seems that Belinda has different ideas from him. Don't worry about it, our activities are not over yet. Robert couldn't care less about the phone at this moment. Even if he called me, he wouldn't pay attention. Belinda was once again in a mysterious state. She was happy in soul, but physically. Why doesn't Robert answer the phone? Pepper looked at the phone that hung up automatically and called again anxiously, because she saw that Tony, who was fighting in the hall, had already fallen into a disadvantage. Happy. Maybe he's sleeping. Pepper. Tony was almost killed. There is really only one person in her eyes, and when she sees that he is in danger, she completely forgets about being polite. Ring ring ring. Another phone call rang, and this time Robert didn't even give the phone a chance to make a sound. He directly called it with a power of space. The moment the phone was covered, it could no longer send out sounds. Let's continue. I can't do it anymore. The scene was extremely tragic. There was chaos everywhere, and all kinds of unknown liquids, whether it was alcohol or water from a fish tank, were scattered everywhere. This is a true portrayal of the battle scene that Tony is currently in. The originally well-decorated hall was completely damaged, and Rhodes, who breathed a sigh of relief, looked at Tony, who fell to the ground and was finally able to say something properly. Do you know what I have been through these days? I have to make dozens of phone calls almost every day, and go to other people's doors to wait for them in the hot sun, just to explain to those people that you and your armor are not a threat. But what about you? I helped you prevent the army from driving tanks to confiscate your armor, but you are joking about it here. Rhodes looked very disgusted at this time. He felt that his efforts were completely worthless, and Tony seemed to be afraid that he would soften his mood and tell him news that would make him even more self-denial. Tony, it doesn't matter. Robert is back. If the army has the guts, let them come. Rod, What? Tony's words stunned Rhodes, and when he reacted, he suddenly realized that Tony was telling him that the things he had done before were of no use, and that even though he had tried his best, the appearance of a person would not work. Although this was indeed the case, and Rhodes acknowledged this in his heart, he still couldn't help but feel angry. Can you stay with Robert and be protected by him for the rest of your life? Tony. Why not? I'm friends with him. Rhodes looked at the person in front of him with disbelief. He couldn't believe that Tony, who had always been arrogant, would accept being protected by others so calmly. You disappoint me so much, Tony. After speaking with a tone of resentment, Rhodes ignited the propellers located at the soles of his feet, and he directly hit the roof and flew out. Bang! A big hole appeared, and Tony looked at the hole blankly. He happened to be able to see a full moon outside at this time. No one knew what he was thinking at this moment. Well, Pepper doesn't have to fight Robert anymore, Tony is fine. Happy reminded him kindly, otherwise Pepper's 60th call would have been made. Boss, Tony seems to be in trouble. Our guess is probably right. In the dark, Natasha Romanoff speaks to Nick Fury via cell phone. Wei Wei reported that according to the intelligence she collected, Tony's recent situation was simply too abnormal. Including handing over the company to Pepper, and not long ago, the armor was stolen by a good brother. Natasha Romanoff would not believe that a smart Tony would not set up a permission recognition function on the armor. But Rhodes was able to successfully put on the armor and take it away without Tony's instruction. As the so-called bystander knows, Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes, who is in authority, is completely unaware of this. The next day, Robert looked at the nearly 70 missed calls on his mobile phone and fell into deep thought. He helped Belinda, who was still sleeping beside him, cover her with a quilt and then quietly left. Tony made 7 phone calls, Pepper made 59. Did the world almost end last night? Or something like that. Beep. Robert walked to the balcony and dialed Tony's number first. He was a little curious about what the other party was calling for. Oh, look, who is this busy man? He doesn't even have time to attend his friend's birthday, so at least he has to give a reason, right? But the fact is that you didn't even answer the phone. As soon as Tony's call was connected, Robert heard a strange voice. After carefully identifying it for a while, he dared to confirm that it was Tony's voice. Sorry Tony, I really didn't know yesterday was your birthday. Although Tony's tone was not good, it was Robert who was more unreasonable after all. After all, it was unjustifiable not to go to his friend's birthday. Ha ha ha, I scared you, didn't I? I'm kidding you, it's just a ruined birthday party, but you can't miss it next year. Tony said in a relaxed tone on the other end of the phone. He seemed very open-minded and said he was joking. Ha. You really scared me. Robert cooperated with him and looked scared on the phone. Okay, Robert, stop pretending, your acting skills are not very good. Tony, on the other hand, immediately exposed him and showed no mercy. The two of them chatted for a while before hanging up the phone when Tony said he had something to do. That's probably what happened. Robert recalled the plot and felt that he basically knew what happened after it was almost the same, so he didn't fight Pepper again. Those nearly 60 phone calls must have been from the other party asking for help, and there was no value in calling again. Base, request to land, I am Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes. At the same time, in an Air Force base of the U.S. military, Rhodes was driving a steel suit and said to the ground tower. Permission to land, Lieutenant Colonel. Excuse me, are you driving an F-22? Why is the radar reflection area so small? Looking at the small dots on the radar, the tower officer asked. His intuition told him that even the most advanced F-22 should not only have this small radar reflection area. Rhodes, it's not F-22, it's something more interesting. As the steel suit driven by Rhodes landed smoothly, it instantly attracted the people around him. What's this? Iron Man looks like I've seen it on the news, but I didn't expect to see it in person. As the person inside that Tony Stark, the American troops at the scene were talking a lot. They looked at the structure of the suit curiously until Rhodes opened the helmet of the suit. Ah, it's Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes. It's true, Lieutenant Colonel, why are you in there? Rod, I snatched it from some crazy person's house. He said with a serious face. The subtext was actually referring to Tony's madness, but the American soldiers in front of him didn't understand this. Oh, This thing is so beautiful, Lieutenant Colonel. At this time, a major saw the situation and ran over. After seeing that the man in the steel suit was his commander, he couldn't help but praise him. Rod, it's not just beautiful, Major. Later, when he saw more and more people preparing to gather around him, he immediately added, "Will you clear the place? Let's go in and talk." Major, "Okay, no problem. Clear the place." Rhodes put the steel armor in the weapons warehouse until the Major General in charge of the Air Force Base arrived dozens of minutes later. Major General, it's perfect. Well done, Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes. Rhodes, thank you for the compliment, sir. Major General, well, let Justin Hammer equip it with weapons. Now the people from the Senate will not bother me, right? Rhodes, what, no sir, I think. When he heard his superior giving such an order, Rhodes subconsciously wanted to refuse, but was interrupted. Major General, Justin Hammer is preparing to participate in a weapons exhibition, and we need this thing as a kick-off. Rhodes, sir, I think it's inappropriate to bring this to the exhibition. Maybe we can let it perform some other tasks. He wanted to try again, but this time the Major General opposite Rhodes was in no mood to play riddles with him. Major General, Lieutenant Colonel, the Army needs something like this, and so do the people. It will boost their confidence, so this time I issued an order. Let Justin load the weapons, he said in a tone that could not be questioned. Seeing that the other party even revealed the relationship between superior and subordinate, Rhodes had no choice but to agree immediately. Yes, sir. Rhodes braced himself and replied, and slowly walked out with the Major General's satisfied eyes. On top of a giant donut in California, Tony was looking at the sunrise coulee, holding a box of donuts he just bought in his arms. A one-eyed man in black suddenly broke this harmonious scene and shouted to Tony. "Sir, I demand that you leave the donuts immediately." Tony. In the fast food restaurant, Nick Fury and Tony sat across from each other. "I don't want to join your Superboy gang." Nick. Ha, I know you have always been used to being free and loose. How does the result look like? Is it ideal? Ignoring Tony's sarcasm, Fury asked the other person with a smile. Tony. Fury's words almost made him break his guard, because he was enjoying the result of being free and undisciplined, death. I'm sorry, I didn't want us to have an unpleasant incident when we first met. Tony was reminding Fury that he was on the verge of going crazy. Oh, okay, I'll end the topic here. Tony. Very good. Sorry, I'm a little drunk. Where is this? As he spoke, he looked to the side to see the street signs or something. As a result, when he turned his head, Fury saw the poisoning reaction caused by the palladium element. It seems that your situation is not good. Stretching out his hand, Fury took a closer look, which can be described as shocking. Tony. Trust me, it's nothing. I've been in worse situations. Unlike Fury's worried look, Tony himself seemed to be more open-minded about his poisoning than others. Da. The sound of high-heeled leather shoes hitting the ground sounded. Tony looked towards the source of the sound and found a woman wearing an agent uniform walking towards him. Natasha Romanoff. We have cleared this area, but I'm afraid it won't last long. She approached slowly. Tony didn't recognize her at first, but when she walked in front of her, it was hard for him not to recognize her. Tony moved the sunglasses on his face down, and after confirming that he had identified the right person, Tony said with a slightly angry voice. "Oh, you're fired, Natasha Romanoff. It's not up to you." However, his words were retorted forcefully by others, which made him even more unhappy. When Natasha Romanoff saw this, she took out a needle from behind her back without hesitation and stuck it into Tony before he could react. The needle was pierced through the neck, and Natasha Romanoff forced the injection into Tony in a manner that would be given to an animal, and the injection was completed within a second. "What did you do to me?" "Oh, wait, what is that? Is there more? I think I might be cured if I give it a few more shots." The reason why Tony's attitude changed so drastically was because he truly felt that the poisonous imagination in his body was quickly relieved after taking an injection. Tony, who originally expected to die from poisoning in the next 2 days, now feels that he can live longer. Fury. That's lithium dioxide. That thing can only relieve symptoms. If you want to completely solve the problem, you have to come up with something new. Tony, I'm more professional than you in this area. I've tried every possibility, but it doesn't work, so don't bother me anymore and let me fend for myself, okay? Fury, don't bother you. It was you who bothered us first. Do you know that I have bigger troubles than this in the Southwest, but you made me waste a lot of time here. Tony, I'm sorry if that's the case and I can help if needed. He is not a person who is indifferent. At least now it seems that the other party is doing it for his own good, so Tony decided to return the favor to the other party before he died. What he dislikes the most is this thing, to strangers. Especially so. Fury, let's wait until you find something new. Tony, have you never listened to me? I've tried every method, but it doesn't work. He was a little angry again, because Fury's words had been on Tony's mind for a long time. Fury, are you sure it's every kind? Maybe there's one you haven't tried yet. What do you mean? You'll find out later. Regarding Tony's question, Fury said mysteriously. Meanwhile, this morning the White House welcomed a guest it once knew well. Lytton, Robert, please believe me. The people who caused trouble for you and your friends after you left were really not sent by me, and I also intentionally stopped them. Robert was found by Lytton himself. As the President of the United States today, he got up early just to welcome this man. To be honest, if you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known about these things. Robert flipped through the information in his hand. These were the people in the United States who wanted to find him during the months when he fought the Ancient One. It can be said that all of them were big shots. After Lytton's biased and suggestive explanation, Robert understood the purpose of the person who was looking for him at that time. Lytton, I should, you know. In fact, I have always wanted to be friends with you, and now is the time for me to show my sincerity. A warm smile appeared on his face. If ordinary people saw it, they might think Lytton, the President of the United States, was quite friendly, but in Robert's opinion. Ha, what a great friend. He said something sarcastically to Lytton, and when he saw the doubtful expression on his face, Robert couldn't help clarifying his words. If you were really an emotional person, you wouldn't just watch those people in the Senate and the military force Tony to hand over his personal belongings. Don't tell me that your re-election has nothing to do with the epic technology Tony announced that day. Robert's words were undoubtedly a slap in Lytton's face. If it were for other matters, the president could still refute it, but in Tony's case, he did not handle it honestly. Lytton, yes, I admit that my re-election has a lot to do with Tony, but you and I both know that it is just a lie. You have to operate behind that kind of leap-forward technology. Robert, okay, I'm too lazy to beat around the bush with you. Are you sure the list you gave me is the one who wants to trouble me during this period? Seeing that Lytton was about to use his same method of deceiving the people on himself again, Robert hurriedly stopped him before he could do anything. Yeah, I'm sure. Lytton was interrupted from casting a spell, and for a moment he felt a little awkward when speaking. In fact, this was something he showed deliberately. It was specially designed to paralyze Robert and leave him with the impression that the President of the United States was careless. It'll be weird if you finish writing it. Looking at Lytton's appearance, Robert added in his heart that he would not believe that the list given by the other party was all the people. There must be something Lytton didn't say. There must be many of his comrades and allies among them, and maybe even U.S. President Lytton himself participated in the action against Robert. These people shouldn't be able to deal with this old guy, right? Another test. What are you going to do with them? Do you need me to invite them out to explain things clearly? There is almost no difference with what Robert thought. Lytton is testing him at this time, and a lot of information can be obtained from his attitude towards those who want to treat him unfavorably. Lytton originally thought that with Robert's character, if he really fully recovered, he would definitely teach these people a lesson. As for killing them, Mr. President, he had never thought about it. After all, Lytton clearly marked this person's identity on the list. Any one of them would be a person who could shock the United States. I believe that normal people would not have the idea of killing them, because that would definitely happen. Facing the endless pursuit of the forces behind him. This is still small, and a really big impact may still lead to turmoil across the United States, or even the possibility of disintegration. HMPH. No need to talk about it, just tell these people to prepare their own graveyards. However, Robert always surprises people. As soon as he finished speaking, big beads of sweat fell from Lytton's face. Quote, "Oh, no, Robert, please calm down, these people can't kill." Robert. Lyton looked at Robert, who suddenly left through the light door of blue energy. It was useless for him to try to persuade him again. Fake. This reckless man. After everyone left, Lytton stamped his feet fiercely on the spot. He originally thought that even Robert would not dare to be so unscrupulous even in his prime, but now it seems that this person really dares. Beep. While scolding Robert, Lytton picked up the landline phone on the president's desk and called the Pentagon. "Mr. President, what are your instructions?" The call was connected instantly, and then a Pentagon operator dedicated to serving the president answered the call, thus eliminating many unnecessary steps. "Linton, put me through General Freeman." "Yes." The operator was startled by the president's heated tone. He thought something big had happened and hurriedly transferred the call. "Hello, in the office, Freeman is processing today's documents, including which military force is organizing exercises, and which area of the Earth is in chaos and requires the U.S. military to maintain the so-called peace." "General Freeman, this is Linton. I'm calling just to say one thing. Robert is crazy." "Freeman, what? Can you tell me the whole story?" As two of the top figures in the United States, Freeman would not think that the president would make fun of such an important matter. "Okay, here's the thing." Lytton tried his best to repeat what happened just now in as short a language as he could, because at this time he was not sure whether Robert had really gone to seek revenge, so he urgently needed the intervention of the U.S. military. And although he was the nominal commander-in-chief of the entire army, it was only a few years after all, and his status as commander-in-chief was gone when the next president took office. Lytton cannot be president forever, but Freeman can be general forever, so normally the middle and high-level officials of the U.S. military know who to listen to. In the past, with Wells restraining Freeman, he was not completely above him as president, but now that he is the only general in the U.S. military, things are different. "This is such a stupid plan. Mr. President, I don't understand why you would adopt this decision." 5 minutes later, Lytton explained the cause and effect of the matter clearly, and modified it, such as testing Robert to see if someone else gave him advice rather than his improvisation, etc. "Lytton, I really shouldn't listen to him, but now that things have happened, we have to find a way to General Freeman. Hey, is there any way to send the army to suppress it? Someone has already tried it for us, and now his name is being reviled by the people on the pillar of shame." He was referring to Wells, the admiral who had once been his equal. "Lytton, what should we do? He is already a little panicked now." "Freeman, I'll try to call Robert to communicate. If it doesn't work, then maybe we can handle the funeral more easily." His meaning was already obvious. How could Lytton, a mature guy like him, not hear that Freeman had no intention of sending troops to stop Robert? "I'll think of another way." Doo-doo. After hanging up the phone, Lytton threw the microphone in his hand on the table. "Freeman is a coward. He actually wants to wait until he is done with his rampage to deal with his funeral. Doesn't he know the consequences of those people's death?" Lytton was furious. He didn't want to find problems with himself at all, but wanted to blame all the mistakes on others. This is human nature, but it should not happen to the president of a country. Ring ring ring. Suddenly the phone rang. Lytton was next to the phone, so he picked it up. "Lytton. Hello, Mr. President. I unfortunately inform you that Mr. Reed was killed, and the person who attacked him, according to reliable intelligence, that person was Colonel Robert." The person on the other end of the phone spoke the news with some trembling. He was afraid of being involved in this whirlpool. As the person who could contact the president, he certainly knew some of the inside information. "Who is Reed?" Reed Solomon, one of the rule makers of Wall Street, one of the founders of the National Bank of the United States, and the real leader of the Solomon family, one of the world's top conglomerates. "Fake. He really dares." On the phone, Lytton cursed loudly, making the person on the phone so frightened that they didn't dare to say anything. Ring ring ring. Suddenly, another backup phone in the office rang. "Mr. President, this is California. Mr. Webb has been killed. The separatists are expected to get the news in 1 hour. Please prepare yourself and the White House." Lytton. Got it. Ring ring ring. Distraught, I hung up the 2 calls, followed by more calls. At this time, a person covered in blue energy appeared in many places across the United States within a few minutes. Wherever he passed, a local big shot was bound to be killed. And these people, without exception, appeared on the list Lytton gave to Robert. Let me see who else is there. In the air, Robert, who was basically in a red-eye state, picked up the list and looked at it, and found that he had killed all 7 people in just a short time. Oh, you want to take advantage of me? It depends on whether you can handle it or not. Looking in the direction of Washington, Robert's mouth showed a smile. The reason why his work efficiency is so high depends on the fact that Lytton added the address after each person's identity. Doesn't this tempt Robert to kill these people? Unlocking the space defense on his body, Robert's cell phone rang immediately. Ring ring. I looked up and saw that it was Fury calling. Hey, what are you doing? Standing unscrupulously in the sky, the power of space allowed him to compress space, so Robert got inspiration from the air wall in the game and created the air steps under his feet. It looks like there is nothing, but in fact if someone stands on it, they will find something that feels like a step. Fury, you have the nerve to ask me why, but now I want to ask you what you are doing, Robert. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury is undoubtedly very angry at this time. He is now at Tony's house to provide him with inspiration for creating new elements. On the other side, there is still trouble happening in New Jersey in the Southwest region. He is already annoyed enough now, but what has Robert done? Business giants, government officials, top military officials, congressmen from both the Democratic and Labor parties, local giants. Robert was able to deal with these types of people who would be extremely miserable for ordinary people in just half an hour, without even giving him a chance to react. So what? Killing them is the order of the great President of the United States. Fury. What? He was a little confused now. In fact, Fury also wondered why Robert killed these people for no reason. There had to be a reason, right? So then Robert told him his reasons, but in a direction that he didn't notice. A large caliber sniper rifle was set up where he just killed the local big shot. Fury. Lytton is crazy. After he understood the situation, he instantly saw through Lytton's thoughts. It was just to use Robert's power to suppress dissidents, and the result was like this. Fury. Listen to me. He wanted to say something else, but Robert was destined not to hear it, because... Boom. A harsh sound rang in his ears. Almost at the same moment, Robert felt the hairs on his body stand up. He subconsciously wanted to dodge, but the large caliber bullet had already arrived. Crack, hitting him right in the head. A large caliber sniper rifle that can be used to penetrate the armor of a light tank can be imagined to have an effect on a human body. Now Robert's head was like a watermelon being hit by a bullet. It was pierced instantly. Mission completed. 1,000 meters away, the sniper put away his gun and was about to leave, but before that, he subconsciously glanced back. Bah, I thought it was so powerful, but I didn't expect that I could still get beaten. The word, death, was stuck in his throat and he couldn't get it out, because an incredible thing happened right before his eyes. The head, can the head grow back again? I saw Robert, who had just been hit on the head by him, now covered with a layer of green light, and his damaged head was also recovering quickly. Ghost. This is definitely a ghost. Run. The sniper quickly packed up and immediately fled towards the pre-planned route. Hey, Robert, what's that loud noise over there? Hey. Fury's voice rang on the phone, but Robert couldn't hear what he was saying at this time, because there was only anger in his eyes now. I don't care who you are, go to hell. A huge amount of space crack appeared above Robert's area, covering a radius of 10 miles. The next space crack that represented destruction was just put down by Robert in a daze. At this time, he was about to completely lose his sanity, and how could he care about other things? Oh my God, God help. The escaping sniper failed to escape Robert's attack range, and even his companions and the residents who were originally in this area were all buried with him. Ah, go to hell. When everything on the ground was completely wiped out, Robert was still angry. It was not until the ground was leveled to a depth of several hundred meters that his vision became clear. I originally wanted to spare your life. However, after the clear light appeared for a moment, it disappeared again. At this moment, Robert's eyes were fixed on the direction of Washington. He had experienced a death just now. If it weren't for his physical fitness far exceeding that of ordinary people, and the natural explosion of the time eternity ability given to him by the time stone, he would have saved his life. Otherwise, Robert would be a cold corpse lying on the ground now. He was originally angry this morning, but now he is completely ignited. Then someone is destined to be unlucky. Head, I think you should see this. Fury had already left Tony's house and was now on a plane to Washington. Fury. What? Taking the tablet handed over by his agent, the agent's face was filled with shock, which gave Fury a bad feeling. There are two satellite comparison pictures on the tablet. The time on one shows the time before yesterday, while the other was taken 20 minutes ago. There is reliable information that Mr. Robert appeared there. It is very likely that he did this. The agent tried to keep his tone calm so that he could report the matter to Fury. According to preliminary statistics, there were nearly 30,000 people living in this 10-mile pit. It is obvious that Colonel Robert has lost control. I suggest the use of humane destruction. The agent wanted to continue talking, but was interrupted by Fury. Fury. That's enough. I understand, you go down first. Fury waved his hand and now he could be considered upset. Although the subordinate agent didn't finish what he said, he was actually able to understand the meaning. If I could really destroy him, why would I wait until now? Fury looked at the backs of his men leaving and said in his heart. When Robert broke into the White House, he knew exactly what happened. A whole regiment of troops. Their weapons didn't even hurt the opponent's hair. Fury didn't think that if more people could get it, different results. Hey. Why can't these people have a longer memory? Fury sighed. He felt that with normal thinking, after seeing Robert's unparalleled strength, he should not mess with him anymore, but I hope this call can come in time. Taking out his cell phone, Fury hesitated for a long time before choosing to make a call. The reason for hesitation was that he had had an unpleasant conflict with the other party, and that time it was also because of Robert. Fury. Hello, Captain. White House. No, no, no. Robert, please believe that I really don't have anyone else, and I really don't know who sent the person who shot you. Seeing Robert leaving and returning, Lytton began to be frightened. The fact that he would immobilize all White House personnel for no other reason was enough to make people frightened. I don't have time to listen to your nonsense. However, Robert didn't believe Lytton's lies at all, and instead, a blue light blade formed by the power of space appeared in front of the opponent's eyes, ready to kill him if he talked nonsense. Even if you kill me, you won't survive. Lytton was in an absolute crisis, but what he said was irrational at all. Maybe he was scared out of his mind at this moment. Robert. Then I'd like to give it a try. PFF'd. A blue light blade pierced his head, and this one stroke represented the death of a US president who had been re-elected for only 1 month. Tell you something, I am immortal. As if he wanted to kill someone, Robert said in Lytton's ear before he fell to the ground. Forehead. Lytton uttered the last syllable in his throat, and then he fell straight to the ground and died. After doing this, Robert felt extremely calm. The reason why he dared to be so arrogant was because of the latest ability he had recently obtained. Does the eternity of time represent the eternal life of the body and soul? Raising one of his hands, a ball of green energy appeared on it. This is the green color that represents life. Ring ring. Suddenly, the phone in the president's office rang behind him. Robert was now invincible and fearless of everything. Perhaps only morality and faith in this world could restrain him a little. Hey, who are you looking for? Picking up the phone casually, Robert also wanted to know who was calling the president at this time. Are you Robert? A familiar voice came from the other end of the phone, and there was a bit of doubt in his tone at this moment. It's me, General Freeman. Freeman, why are you in the president's office again? You weren't there just now. Where is the president? Get him on the phone. His tone suddenly changed, from questioning Robert to questioning. The reason for this change was because he suddenly thought of a possibility. Please, don't be like that, please. Freeman prayed in his heart, but his prayer was ultimately in vain, because Robert's next sentence admitted something openly. He is already dead, killed by me. Freeman, you're in big trouble. After a brief silence, Freeman yelled on the other end of the phone, but Robert didn't take his words to heart. General Freeman, I think they are the cause of the big trouble. After all, I didn't offend them before, and these people are trying to kill me just like Wells. Robert was calmly explaining a fact, which made Freeman fall into deep thought. Quote, Hey, now that it has happened, we can only find a way to solve it, but you have to help me, Robert. He finally gave up on useless anger and dividing responsibilities to determine who was right and who was wrong, and instead began to think of ways to deal with it. No problem, trust me, General, you will have a perfect reason. After saying that, Robert put the phone aside. When he activated the power of space in his body, the entire Earth quickly turned blue, and finally turned into a planet with blue light. You can send someone to investigate. I think the effect this time will be better than last time. After saying something on the phone, Robert then found a seat to sit down, and Freeman knew that the so-called last time was the time he killed Wells. Dong dong. Suddenly there was the sound of people running in the corridor of the White House, and Robert, who had completely controlled the place, certainly knew who was coming, and ordinary people would not be able to act without his permission. Squeak. Oh my goodness. The door of the office was slowly pushed open, and Captain America saw the body on the ground at the first glance. He has been learning about the current world during this time, so he is no stranger to the current President of the United States. It's still too late. Things have happened, and Captain America also knows the ins and outs of the matter. Fury, who asked him for help this time, did not choose to hide it, but directly told everything he knew. This is also a manifestation of sincerity, and the captain chose to get involved in this whirlpool because of this, but when he arrived, the matter was over. Whose side are you on this time? Captain America. Looks like I can still stand now. He pointed to the corpse on the ground and already expressed his attitude. Robert's body was covered in green light at this time, which was the ability, Time Eternal, obtained from the Time Stone. In the past, his limit could only cover half of the Earth with space energy, but now Robert can be called an eternal existence. With the blessing of eternal time, his physical injuries can be recovered in an instant. Robert. Captain, you broke your promise. Just when Robert was about to approach the captain and thank him for his support, a voice interrupted him, and the owner of the voice was quite familiar to him. Captain America. Do you need my help? The other party doesn't seem very friendly. He instantly made a fighting stance, raised his shield and tried to fight against the intruder with Robert. No, this is too dangerous. Captain, you should go outside and help me deal with my funeral. With that said, he was sent outside the White House, then turned around to look at the visitor and shouted helplessly. Ancient One. As soon as the two of them looked at each other, the Ancient One took action immediately, and Robert quickly retaliated. At the same time, in order to prevent other people from being hurt, they coincidentally came to a no-man's land. Are you sure you want to fight? Robert asked, looking at the expressionless Ancient One and the layer of blue light in the sky. Ancient One, are you sure you want to fight? If you can put away that thing in the sky, maybe I can have a good talk with you. Her face was beginning to feel cold at this time. After all, the Ancient One had been guarding the Earth for hundreds of years, and she had encountered catastrophic events during this period. Whether they are man-made or naturally occurring, they tend not to occur continuously in a short period of time, and this happened twice just after Robert appeared. Ancient One, it doesn't seem like a week has passed since you last promised me, right? When something has been guarded by someone for hundreds of years, it will definitely be cherished and regarded as something as important as or even more important than one's own life. How could the Ancient One not be angry at Robert's repeated actions of destroying the Earth? There's a reason this time. Robert wanted to explain a little bit. Originally, he was already prepared for the battle, because according to the previous plot, the Ancient One would directly rush up to attack him at this time. Ancient One, say. But it was obvious that the other party was not following the routine, and he actually stood there, feeling like he was waiting for Robert to explain. Ah, that's right, why bother to fight and kill? Robert felt that the world had become better, and what he originally thought was a war had a chance to ease. The so-called war is actually between the Ancient One and the Earth. For Robert now, unless someone can kill him with power that ignores the law of time, there is no such thing as a war as far as he is concerned. Ancient One originally wanted to start a war with Robert, but when she came to the familiar no-man's land, she remembered that there seemed to be nothing she could do about him, so she simply listened to what the other party said before making a decision. If Robert really wanted to destroy the Earth, the Ancient One would choose to die with him at all costs. Ancient One, so you are still doing this just to protect yourself. But is your method too radical? After listening to Robert's explanation, she felt that he was doing things in a logical manner, at least not like the kind of lunatic who wanted to destroy the world without any logic at all. That kind of person gave Ancient One the biggest headache. Radical? No, I just think that is the simplest and most effective method. If someone tries to go against me in the future, I will still do it. Robert was explaining his thoughts, and the Ancient One was helpless. These people are really stupid. At the same time, Ancient One was still thinking in her heart that she didn't understand the President of the United States. Robert had obviously shown his ability to transcend the world, so why did these people use worldly methods to deal with him? I hope it's true as you said. You don't have to worry about the next thing. Put away your evil tricks, I will send someone to solve these troubles. Robert. So good. Queens, New York, in an advanced factory belonging to Hammer Industries. Hey my friend, how are you doing? Come see what I have for you. Justin Hammer walked towards Ivan with enthusiasm, and behind him was an assistant holding a bird cage in his hand. Look, isn't it beautiful? With that said, he took the cage in his hand and brought it to Ivan himself. Justin, who had already determined that the man opposite him was his god of wealth, seemed a bit flattering at this time. But Ivan looked at him and then stopped reacting, and started playing with his things instead. Justin, why don't you like it? I got this in Russia, but it cost a lot of money. Ivan, it's not my bird. Finally, his god of wealth responded, but what he said made Justin unhappy. Wah, what, Ivan? It's not my bird, I want my one. Ivan suddenly yelled, making Justin feel very embarrassed, but he still tried to control his emotions and said, okay, even if that's the case, what's the problem? Listen to me Ivan, sometimes people have to learn to be flexible. Just as he was talking, Justin turned his eyes and found that the armor he had imitated Tony made had changed. Justin Hammer, what is this? What did you do to them? As he said that, he hurried over and found that the current appearance of the armor was very different from his design. Jack, pick it up and try it. Can you put it on your head? Climbing up the work stairs, Justin came to the head of the armor to check, then pulled off its head and gave it to his subordinate, who asked him to put it on. Jack, small boss, I mean I can't put it on. He really made two decent gestures before returning the things to Justin. Justin, did you hear that? He can't put it on. Ivan, I think you have to explain to me where the operator of our suit is supposed to get in. Ivan, drones are better. He seemed to have anticipated Justin's reaction, so he acted quite calmly, so calm that Justin would get angry when he saw it. Drones. Wait, you're talking about drones, right? But what the military and the people need are manned combat mechas. Justin Hammer tried his best to suppress his emotions, but Ivan didn't even look at him. You promised. Do you still remember, Ivan, you said it would be no problem to leave those things to you. For this reason, I will give you the best equipment, ample funds, and now your freedom, oh. And I will give you a boss birds brought back from Russia. Justin was really angry. He couldn't help but yell at Ivan, and he listed the things he gave him one by one, trying to awaken Ivan's sense of shame, but what he might not know is that the other person didn't have that thing. Ivan, brother, it's just like what you said, people have to learn to be flexible. Not only did Ivan not feel ashamed, but Ivan also used Justin's words to tell him. There was a brief silence next. After calculating the time in his heart, Justin, who felt that he didn't have much time, could only accept the idea of drones. You'd better make these things look good on me, Ivan. After saying these last words, Justin left angrily. Cut. However, what he said seriously did not seem to be taken seriously by some people. Now here is a temporary news. President Lyndon died of a sudden myocardial infarction at the White House earlier today. Medical experts determined after testing that it was caused by excessive fatigue. It is such a heavy news that the major authoritative media chose to place it in the most unwatched time period and only appeared in the form of inserts. At the same time, in the White House, Anthony Yarling, who was originally the vice president, quickly took over all the powers of the president and immediately implemented a nationwide secret martial law. Because of Robert, heads of many places and families were killed, causing unrest in some places. In order not to cause confusion, Interim President Anthony's deployment was loose on the outside and tight on the inside. Therefore, at this time, military forces across the United States have begun to quietly deploy to various sensitive areas, and even aircraft carriers deployed overseas for combat operations have been urgently mobilized back home. Mr. President, what are we going to do with Robert? At the emergency temporary meeting, Anthony inevitably faced this problem after arranging everything. Those sitting there were all high-level officials in the U.S. government. Although there was a news blockade, they had more or less heard the news. As the vice president, and now as the interim president, Anthony couldn't help but look at one person. Anthony, what's General Freeman's opinion? His current performance has a feeling that Freeman is his superior, but few people present feel that something is wrong. After all, most of the military in the United States is now controlled by him, and having military power means having political power. Freeman, what does this have to do with Robert? Anthony, oh, yes, it doesn't matter, let's do it then. Now that the high-level tone has been set, it's up to people to implement it. Now all the troops that the United States can mobilize have been sent out to maintain stability. They say they are maintaining stability, but they are actually wiping the trouble that Lyndon and Robert have caused. Look at this report. That hole of a few hundred meters you dug in Nevada instantly claimed the lives of 100,000 people. At the SHIELD headquarters, Robert was called by Fury. At this moment, there was a statistical list in front of him of those people who had been affected by his anger. This is my fault, I will compensate. Robert looked at the accident analysis and said it was a subsidence, but how could he not know the real situation? He couldn't help but feel guilty. Nick Fury, I am gratified that you can have the concept of compensation. At least it proves to me that you are still a flesh and blood person, not a completely out of control lunatic. His words are undoubtedly a bit harsh, but it is understandable. No matter what Fury is like, he does have a heart that cares about the world. Robert had no doubt that if he hadn't been so reasonable and had absolute strength in this matter, another person who didn't have these would have been jumped by Fury. I heard that you made a lot of money in the stock market. Take it all out and use it as compensation. But even though he couldn't kill him, Fury would find ways to make Robert feel painful. Robert, but among the money I have, I still have $5 billion borrowed from the bank. I can't give it all to you. I have to return it to others. He tried to struggle. When he talked about the money he borrowed from the bank, Robert became a little embarrassed. In the end, he was even a little embarrassed. Fury, give it all to me, and I will help you pay it back to them. If the remaining money is not enough, the government will have to bear it. All right. So when Robert walked out of the SHIELD building, he changed from a billionaire back to a pauper who could only receive a government subsidy of $100,000. More than $20 billion were lost in one fell swoop, and Robert was almost unsteady on his feet, but he still paid for it in order to gain peace of mind. Thank you for your generosity, sir. To be honest, I really didn't expect you to be so rich. I may have to learn how to trade stocks someday. Fury joked on the sidelines, saying that he sent Robert downstairs specifically to thank him for his generosity. But Robert himself felt that any thank you was just fart, and Fury might just want to come down and mock him again. Ring ring ring. Suddenly, an unexpected phone ringing interrupted Fury's thoughts of continuing to type. He picked up the phone from his arms and his expression immediately became serious. At this time, Robert was also ready to leave this sad place. He was going to find a strange city to think quietly. No, wait, maybe you can be of use. A space door had just been opened by Robert. He was about to leave when Fury grabbed him, as if he was ready to use him. Robert frowned, feeling a little unhappy, thinking why should he give Fury orders as he didn't owe him anything. Why should I work for you? Robert, who originally wanted to ridicule Fury in turn, completely lost his temper after the other party said something. Okay, I understand. I'll send someone over to solve the problem. Fury spoke to the phone first, turned to look at Robert, and stretched out a finger. Robert, such a big deal. Are you planning to give someone? Fury, 1 million. 1 million, do me a favor. Robert originally wanted to offer 100 million, but Fury didn't even give him a chance to make an offer, which made him unhappy. At least 10 million, otherwise there is no need to discuss it. He set a price very forcefully, and Fury also turned around very forcefully to see if he was not going to attack Robert. 3, 2, 1. Based on his bargaining psychology, Robert predicts that Fury will definitely come back before disappearing from his sight, just like a customer who has taken a fancy to a certain product will use the trick of leaving the store to get the lowest price. This is a psychological game, for both buyers and sellers, whoever speaks first will suffer. But when the countdown in Robert's heart ended, Fury still didn't turn around, and when his figure was about to completely disappear. Aren't you going to consider paying back the price? In the end, it was Robert who spoke first. There are two things in a man's confidence. One is strength and the other is confidence. Although having the former and the latter will not be lacking, but lacking either will ultimately make him feel uncomfortable. Not far away, Fury had a smile on his face. Obviously winning this game made him feel better. I'll add another 100,000 to you, for a total of 1.1 million if you want to do it or not. I can't even find someone else to get half of your price. Don't take advantage of it and do it well. I promise you, 1 million and 1 million yuan is just that much. Robert looked at Fury, who never turned around, knowing that he was probably bursting with joy at this time, but there was no way he could make him inferior in skills. Okay, stop pretending to be mysterious. What is the mission? Seeing that Fury had no intention of turning around for a long time, Robert became a little impatient. Is it necessary to be happy for so long? New Jersey. When Robert arrived, he saw a huge amount of robot-like things chasing a group of people. Destroyer. Fury gave him the task of stopping this thing, and also asked him to find out the background of those mysterious people. Thor, you guys leave quickly. As he spoke, he pushed his companion away, and then looked directly at the destroyer, or the controller behind it, Loki, with firm eyes. Thor, listen to me, brother, the person you want to kill is me, it has nothing to do with these people. Let them go. As soon as he finished speaking, the destroyer made no further attack. As you wish. Loki was in the god's domain and saw Thor actually smiling on his face. He just couldn't stand it and directly controlled the destroyer to punch him. Bang! Loki. What? Suddenly he felt that the destroyer had completely lost control. He could see the things in front of him clearly, but no matter how hard he tried, there was no response. Thor yelled at this time, because he saw the destroyer punching him. You must know that he is now an ordinary person, who has lost his divine power. Just when he was about to take such a beating, Thor would have been beaten half to death at least, but at this critical moment, something magical happened. What happened to it? I'm not sure, maybe it's broken. Sylvig. I feel like it has run out of energy. After all, the loss of energy output at that level just now is staggering. As soon as his words came out, those mysterious people in strange clothes began to refute. The one who spoke first was a fat man holding an axe. No, no, no. The destroyer is a war weapon often created by Father Odin. Its power is unlimited. Sylvig. Impossible. Nothing has infinite energy, they must have limits. Fatty. Yes, it's Father Odin. Sylvig. No. Hey guys, I guess that's not what we should be focusing on right now. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel over this, Jane quickly stopped them. She didn't want to be caught in a dilemma between the two parties. Tisk, I think you should try to pick up the thing over there now instead of staring at the thing in front of you. No one noticed Robert in heaven until he spoke. Thor, who are you? Looking at Robert, who was glowing with blue light, Saul asked curiously. This is not a topic you should be concerned about now. This thing belongs to you, right? Saul was talking about love, but Robert had no time to chat with him. After all, Fury only gave him an appearance fee of more than 100 yuan. What? Something flew from a distance, and when it landed in front of Thor, everyone, including several people in strange clothes, made disbelieving sounds. Thor, how did you do that? Looking at Thor's hammer on the ground and the motionless destroyer in front of him, Thor became even more curious. It seems that flowers really need to be exposed to wind and rain to grow. Robert said something carelessly, which made everyone present very confused. Who is Sif? Is he also from the divine realm? Those people wearing strange clothes are actually Asgard, they call them visitors from the realm of God. As Sif is the strongest person in the team except Thor, others are used to asking her questions. Sif. How did I know? Oh my god. Bang. She had just finished speaking half of her words when the destroyer, who had been controlled unable to move just now, regained the ability to move. Sif. What did you do? You fool. Seeing Robert actually loosening his grip on the destroyer, causing Thor to fall to the ground with serious injuries, Sif became angry. Ah, she brandished the weapon and rushed towards Robert. Yes, him, instead of looking for the culprit who injured Thor. Do I look easy to bully? Robert looked at Sif, who was rushing towards him as fast as he could, with deep hostility in her eyes. He couldn't help but have doubts about his own face. Just when Robert wanted to find a mirror to look at, someone had already rushed to him. Sif, you will pay for what you have done. With a fierce force, she suddenly jumped into the air, shouting slogans in her mouth, and hit Robert straight with the weapon in her hand. You're right. Bang. Sif. Oh no. Quote. After shouting 3 times, the 3 warriors from God's domain quickly headed into a deep pit to check on their companions. Just now, before they had time to take action, they saw Sif's attack on Robert was interrupted by a wave of his hand, and then flew back at an incredible speed and hit the ground directly. The powerful impact caused a human-shaped hole several meters deep to form on the ground. When the splashed dust dispersed, what was revealed in front of everyone was a bloody man covered in bright red, with only weak breathing left. Ah, you must die. Not only do the people from the divine realm have this attitude, but even Jane, who is a human on Earth, has the same idea as them. As Saul's first girlfriend, Jane now has a lot of malice towards the guy who hurt her boyfriend. You were really a bloody thug. I thought you were the hero who came to save us, but now it seems that you are the same as the shit that controls that big guy. Jane was not stingy with her output, and poor Loki was also affected when he was hiding behind the destroyer, which makes people describe him as that. There were a total of 8 people at the scene, not counting the 2 lying on the ground. The remaining few people were now glaring at Robert. Even the destroyer controlled by Loki did not rush to leave after seriously injuring Thor, but chose to stay and watch the show. You know, the task my employer gave me is just to maintain law and order here. Other tasks including rescuing you are just incidental. But unfortunately, the money he gave me is not sufficient. I can just forget to do those incidental tasks. As he spoke, Robert waved his hand, and a force so huge that it distorted the surrounding space directly hit the destroyer who was watching the show. He saw that it was directly smashed into pieces with the majesty of destroying the world just now. Oh, fuck. In God's domain, Loki, who was controlling the destroyer, was the first to be affected. Since the destroyer he controlled was destroyed, he also suffered a little backlash. It took a long time for Loki to suppress the backlash, and then he began to look in the direction of the Earth and the universe and muttered to himself. Is there such a strong person still there in that place? At the same time, during the conflict in New Jersey, as the destroyer was destroyed by Robert's casual blow, there was a brief silence. But that was only short-lived. Women, especially women in love, tend to lose their minds. Jane was like this now. She looked down at Saul, who was lying in her arms and didn't know whether he was alive or dead. She actually felt a fearless emotion. Jane, even if you have. Sylvid. No, stop talking about Jane. Seeing that Robert was already condensing a huge amount of blue energy that was even bigger than the one that destroyed the destroyer just now, Sylvig quickly stopped Jane from continuing. Because that is likely to result in no one alive at the scene. Snort. Jane made a sound from her nasal cavity, but in the end she did not dare to do anything under the threat of death, and instead began to check on Thor in her arms. Gudong. At this time, there was a sound of swallowing saliva. Several warriors from God's domain looked at me and I looked at you. For a while, none of them came to Robert for revenge. Just kidding, the destroyer can be crushed later, is that a power we can shake? Let's wait until Thor and Sif are better. This is what the 3 people are thinking now. The world fell silent when Robert showed his unparalleled power. A few hundred meters away, Coulson, who had witnessed the entire process, quickly dialed Fury's phone number. Doo-doo. Hello, Agent Coulson. The phone only rang for a few seconds before it was answered, and Fury's voice came from the other side. Coulson. It's my head. The purpose of my call is to confirm with you that the sudden foreign aid here was brought by you, right? Fury. If you are referring to Robert, then it is true that I went to him to deal with the trouble. This cost us a lot of money. How is the effect? Can we control it on site? Coulson. Well, I have it under control. He looked at the now silent scene and said with some uncertainty. As for why he was not sure, it was because he felt that the scene was a little too quiet. But after receiving the order, he only observed from a distance. Without the order, he would have run closer to see what these people were talking about. Please don't die, please. Except for Jane, everyone else at the scene was like a cicada. Robert didn't want to disturb other people. Jane, please. As she spoke, she suddenly started crying. When one of her tears fell on Sol's hand, she saw his fingers suddenly move. Forehead. Buzz. Thor's hammer, which was thrown to the ground by Robert, started to tremble with Thor's soft call. I used to think this was quite magical, but I didn't expect it to be like that. Looking at Thor's hammer on the ground, when Robert was watching Marvel movies, he thought it was amazing that there were restrictions on how to pick it up, but when he really came to the Marvel world, when he really came into contact with this hammer, he felt that it was just like that. The so-called restrictions were actually only effective for ordinary people, but had no effect at all on people with absolute strength. Otherwise, the original Hela would not have been able to crush the hammer so easily, and its magic was limited to ordinary people. Boom boom. I saw that the originally cloudless weather in the sky suddenly became dense with dark clouds, and gradually began to thunder loudly. He's about to wake up. The fat man among the visitors from God's realm looked at Robert's direction intentionally or unintentionally as he spoke, feeling like he was waiting for Thor to wake up and cause trouble for him. Chapter 71. Ah, ha. Suddenly, when everyone was almost unprepared, Thor, who was lying on the ground, suddenly flew up, and at the same time, the hammer on the ground also flew into his hand. That's right. Okay, now you can introduce where you are from. It will be easier for me to do business. As he spoke, Robert waved in one direction, and Coles, who was originally peeping with a telescope a few hundred meters away, appeared in front of everyone. Hi, how are you guys? As if to hide the embarrassment of holding the telescope in his hand, Coles said hello and slowly put away the things. Stop hiding that thing of yours and interrogate these people quickly. The price you paid is not high. I might leave in a while. Then don't blame me if you don't get any information. Robert directly interrupted Cole's actions. The reason why he showed an anxious attitude was actually telling Fury that his price was low. Coles. Okay. Seeing Robert here, Coles had nothing to be afraid of, so he took out his notebook and prepared to question Saul and others. Thor. Put that thing away. But the other party didn't seem to want to give face. At this time, Saul looked at Sif lying on the ground with anger in his eyes. He was eager to know what happened and he didn't have the time to do it. It's him. It's the young lady who was injured by this thug. Saul's questioning gaze was originally directed at several of his comrades, but before they could speak, Jane couldn't wait to accuse Robert. Boom. Perhaps it was the thunder in the sky and the handsome sight of Saul flying into the sky just now that gave her courage. Snapped. Jane. Bump. I've seen you unhappy for a long time. Is one slap enough? If not, I can give you more. As Robert spoke, he wiped his hands on his clothes, as if hitting Jane was dirtying his hands. Seeing his beloved woman being beaten, how could Saul endure it? As he said that, he was about to pick up the hammer and hit Robert. He saw the thunder in the sky cooperating with him to look terrifying, but the next second. Forehead. The blue space energy directly cleared the space. The dark clouds that had gathered were dispersed by Robert, and the sun once again shone on the earth. And our Thor is also entangled by an invisible force at this moment, and it is difficult to even lift his fingers. Thor. He began to struggle desperately but to no avail. Seeing that the conflict was likely to intensify further, Coles quickly came out to dissuade him. Mr. Robert, maybe we can explain the cause and effect of the matter clearly. I think there must be a misunderstanding. As soon as Coles finished speaking, Silwiger also came out to smooth things over. That's right, I think there must be some misunderstanding. Our common enemy is the person behind the thing that was smashed just now, right? As he spoke, Sylvig pointed to the wreckage of the destroyer on the ground. When Thor moved his eyes there with difficulty, he suddenly stopped struggling. Then everyone began to calm down, even Jane, who was knocked to the ground, was no exception. When she saw that Saul was unable to fight back in Robert's hands, she lost her previous arrogance. Jane, I apologize for my previous impulsiveness. Thor, what the hell happened? So in the face of Robert's incomprehensible strength, everyone except himself began to calm down, and they all hoped to resolve the matter through reasonable means. After everyone analyzed the ins and outs of the matter, the strongest person present except Robert expressed his opinion. Saul, Sif, there is indeed something extreme with Jane. I apologize to you on this point. As he spoke, he clenched his fists quietly, and then quietly lowered them. He seemed a little unable to express his words. Okay, now that the matter is settled, I'm leaving. But Robert doesn't care whether he sincerely apologizes, after all, he has absolute strength. A space gate appeared behind him, and Robert returned to the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters and appeared in front of Fury. The matter is settled, make money. Looking at the other person's one eye, Robert said unceremoniously. When walking out of the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters building, Robert looked at the transfer of 1.1 million, and suddenly didn't know whether to be happy or sad. Hey, the entire 20 billion is just gone. He really wanted to find a step to sit down and repent for his previous reckless actions, but Robert did not choose to go that way in front of S.H.I.E.L.D. because. Shame on you, Tony. Okay, let me see how effective it is. At Tony's house in California, he is currently conducting research and development experiments on new materials in the laboratory. I saw him emitting blue rays from a device, and then reflecting the rays through a prism to where he needed it to appear. Oh, it seems there is a slight deviation. Where is my wrench? However, perhaps due to some errors in previous calculations, the ray was not aligned with the new material, but was slightly off. This experiment cannot be stopped once it starts, so Tony can only find a wrench to correct the position of the ray. Buzz. In fact, Tony had anticipated this situation early on, so he placed the wrench nearby and moved the debugged device in one direction. The blue ray moved accordingly, carrying a high temperature, and everything it passed was easily chopped into pieces, whether it was steel or wooden boards. Suddenly a blue light hole appeared on the path that the ray must pass through, and Robert's figure suddenly walked out of it. No, don't Robert, don't come out, Tony yelled wildly, and his hands were not idle. He hurriedly moved the device in the opposite direction, but it was too late. Robert. Tony, what did you say? As soon as he stepped out of the gate of space, he heard Tony yelling there, and before he could react, a blue ray almost hit him. Oh, Robert subconsciously solidified the space around him and blocked it in front of him. Zitza. This action saved him a lot of pain. Robert quickly scanned the scene and immediately remembered what Tony was doing after discovering this arrangement and layout. He quickly stepped aside, rubbed his nose in embarrassment and said, "Seems to have come at the wrong time. Tony, this is a bad time, man." Seeing that Robert was out of danger, Tony aimed the ray at the original place again. With sparks and lightning all the way, he successfully synthesized the new element. Oh, it's so beautiful. Isn't it, Robert? Tony took the new element in his hand, looked at it, and then showed it in front of Robert. Well, it's really pretty. Facing Tony's eager eyes, Robert could only give an evaluation based on appearance. Tony, it's not just that. He picked up the new element and put it into the new reactor. The moment the new element entered, the light in the reactor suddenly rose. After replacing the old reactor on his chest, Tony replaced the new triangular reactor on his body. A feeling of being reborn immediately emerged in his heart. The Stark Expo will open tonight, and a large number of new equipment will be released, especially the steel armor made by Justin Industries. Let's interview Mr. Justin. At this time, the TV in the laboratory, as if giving Tony a hint on what to do next, began to play the news about the Stark Expo. Tony's attention was immediately attracted, and Justin happened to appear on the camera at this time. Yes, our new equipment from Justin Industry will be unveiled at the expo, believe me. They will definitely shock your visual nerves. Justin was high-spirited in front of the camera, and he seemed to enjoy this feeling, but in Tony's eyes he was just a clown. Tony. HMPH. He actually wants to become famous through my expo. Robert looked at him and asked curiously. You don't seem to like him very much. Tony, if you were targeted by someone at a hearing, maybe you would understand how I feel. The key is that this person who is clearly on the opposite side of me actually shamelessly fawns over me in private. This is what I can't stand the most. It makes me feel sick. Tony's words were all sarcastic remarks about Justin. Perhaps this is how the wallflower feels to most people. Robert, what are you going to do? Let him run wild at your company's expo? HMPH. Of course not. What do you want to go with me? Tony said as he walked up to the steel armor. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Robert, asking. It's a pleasure to accompany you, and I think it will be an unforgettable experience. Robert meant something, but Tony didn't take it seriously. When, as the mask of the steel armor was put on, Tony expressed extremely confidently. Tony, oh, I guess Justin has no other way to make me remember him than to disgust me. Robert shrugged and didn't speak clearly, because he knew Tony would know it later. Good evening everyone, the Stark Expo is about to begin. Let's first enjoy the war machines at the Justin Industrial Exhibition. The host's voice sounded on the stage, and after a brief introduction, she stepped aside and let Justin himself come up to explain his new equipment. Okay, let's have an appetizer before showing off the other equipment. Justin is no longer as high-spirited as he was at the beginning, even if he thinks about it. After all, his mechas, for which he had high hopes, were told by their chief Ivan just a few hours ago that they were only those that could salute. How to display the prototype? Justin's confidence was suddenly dampened by half, but for the sake of future military orders and for the company to continue to operate, he had no choice but to bite the bullet. Wow, who is this man? Iron Man. At the Stark exhibition, the Mark I modified by Justin Industrial exploded the scene as soon as it was unveiled. Oh. Friends, this is not Iron Man, but a war machine modified by Justin Industries. Bang! As Justin's words fell, the weapons on the war machines were activated one after another, and they seemed to be showing their power towards the crowd. Some visitors to the exhibition were inevitably frightened, but Justin laughed and continued. No. Don't be afraid, friends. It won't attack us, because the controller of the war machine is Colonel Rhodes. Let us give you a round of applause. Pa. As soon as Justin finished speaking, the scene erupted into warm applause, and Rhodes also revealed his face from the steel armor. Oh, marvelous. Is Justin Industrial's stock going to skyrocket soon? I have to buy it quickly. With Rhod's appearance, the atmosphere at the exhibition was pushed to a climax, but Justin was not satisfied with this. Because there are people from the military sitting below, and they know better than Justin how the war machine came about, so he has to make his product debut next. Justin, thank you everyone. But the next step is the theme of this Justin Industry exhibition. I would like to apologize to my media friends first. Because their pen and ink may not be enough. With the warm-up of the war machine, it was much easier to mobilize the emotions later, so Justin introduced his own drones one by one. Let's take a look at the future powerful equipment of the U.S. military. Army, Air Force, Navy, Army. Every time Justin talks about a military branch, exciting music will sound on the scene, and as various types of mechas slowly rise, passionate short films will also be played on the big screen behind. The live effect is so full. Tony, are you sure you want him to continue performing? In the sky not far from the exhibition, Tony and Robert stood side by side. They had been watching here for a while. I can't eat hot tofu in a hurry, Robert, I'm waiting for an opportunity. Tony said with an inscrutable expression, but because the steel armor blocked his expression, no one could see it. If you want to show off, you can show off, no matter what. Robert looked at Tony, who raised his head slightly. Even though he couldn't see the expression under his mask now, he could still imagine the face behind him that needed a beating. Justin, the last branch. Marines, Papa. The applause gradually sounded. Justin had indeed achieved the effect he wanted. His robots that could only salute really frightened everyone. The most important thing is that the military representatives seemed to be frightened. This is what Justin is concerned about. That's it. Tony whispered something in the sky, and then reached a position a few meters above the exhibition at a rapid speed. Tony, oh, it looks like it's very lively here. Look who that is. Iron Man. Hey, I've seen him, he's Iron Man. Stop calling me brother, we all know this. When Tony appeared wearing a red and gold steel suit, everyone underneath was attracted to him, and his next move set off the whole crowd. When Tony, who could have landed smoothly, just used a set of squatting movements. Although it was useless, it was cool. Tony, why are you here? I mean. Rhodes, who was wearing a war machine at this time, suddenly spoke when he saw Tony's arrival. He was afraid that the other party was here to cause trouble. Tony, if you believe me, let everyone evacuate first. I suspect Justin and Ivan are cooperating. Rhodes, what? Ivan is still alive. Rhodes' words were full of doubts, but Tony ignored them and walked straight to Justin and asked, where is he? Justin. What? Facing Tony, he inevitably became panicked, subconsciously took a step back, and even thought of running away when he reached the edge of the stage. Ivan Vanko. Where is he? Toby would not give Justin this chance. He walked up to Justin and questioned him, but what Tony didn't know was that the war machine was modified by Ivan. At this moment, he was hiding in front of the computer and overheard their conversation. Ivan. Let me see, Tony. I don't know if another annoying guy is here. The person he was talking about was Robert. In fact, he left a deep impression on Ivan. After all, normal people would definitely remember that moment if they were controlled in place motionless for a long time. Oh, it seems like he didn't arrive. Then you will be in trouble, Tony. With a toothpick in his mouth, Ivan checked the surveillance cameras throughout the exhibition and still found no sign of Robert. This undoubtedly gave him reassurance. Next, Ivan was about to start his action. Justin. No, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't know Ivan. Tony. I still want to make excuses. He was about to use some special means, but Rhodes behind him suddenly made a bad sound. Tony, a bunch of garbled characters flashed in front of me. Is that normal? Tony. What kind of gibberish? Bang. The war machine responded to him with practical actions. It fired bombs directly at Tony. Fortunately, he was wearing a steel suit, otherwise it would be scrapped now. Tony. What are you doing, Rod? No, that's not what I did. I lost the command of the armor, and my actions are locked. Rhodes yelled crazily in his armor. He was actually panicking now. Bang. The light war machine is not the worst thing. What is worse is that the new unmanned soldiers that Justin just showed have their hands raised, and their hands are covered with micro-missiles. Robert. Tony suddenly shouted into the sky, because he knew that if these missiles were launched, he would be fine, but the people in the audience might not. Receive. A blue light curtain suddenly appeared, trapping Tony, the war machine, and the robots manufactured by Justin Industries. No, wait. Let me out, I'm still in there. Pang. Justin hurriedly knocked on the blue light screen for fear of being affected by the imminent battle, but Robert seemed to want to play with him and opened a small hole for him. Oh, whoever you are, don't even think about letting me get out of this hole. Open it wider. Justin yelled angrily, but Robert was indifferent to this. Instead, he found a nearby place to buy a bucket of popcorn and began to enjoy Tony's performance. Robert, I feel like I'm falling in love with you more and more, ha. Bump. Tony was punching a child, sweeping across the drone armor made by Justin Industries. Due to the huge difference in materials, these robots had almost no power to fight back. If they hit Tony, they will at most knock him away, but things will be different if Tony hits them. This Tony, and that mysterious man. Ivan watched in front of the computer as the combat drones he made were being damaged one after another. Within a few minutes, there were only 7 left, and the results obtained by those lost drones only left Tony with nothing. 2 scratches. It's no wonder that he went crazy with anger. It would be quite frustrating to have something that someone else had worked so hard to create be easily smashed by another person. No, I haven't lost yet. Ivan was in that frustrated mood at this time, but he quickly came to his senses and looked at another computer where the war machine was operating the computer independently. He seemed to have found a life-saving straw and tried desperately to save it. Hold on. Tony, he's going to attack. Just halfway through Rhodes' reminder, Ivan turned off the sound function of his armor in the background. HMPH. Ivan, stop hiding, I know it's you. Tony looked at the war machine that was raising his hand to accumulate power in his palm. He made the same action as it and said to Ivan behind it. What if you knew? You will definitely die today. Ivan said something bitterly in front of the computer, and then gave the command to the war machine to fire, and fire with full force. Bump. The two energies collided, making the space seem to collapse, and then the two energies cancelled each other out. This is dangerous. Seeing Tony and War Machine fighting, Justin hid aside. When Tony violently beat up the drone armors of Justin Industries just now, he still had the guts not to drill small holes. But when a direct confrontation broke out between War Machine and Tony, Justin was cowed. He also saw the collision between the two energies, creating a scene that looked like the space was being collapsed. I'd better run away. Seeing that both sides began to increase their energy output, the new forces had already collided before the two forces could offset each other. This resulted in a round energy ball being formed between the two energies, one blue and one yellow. Boom. Justin just climbed out of the small hole, and huge amounts of explosions occurred inside. He couldn't help but look back inside, and found that the few remaining drones had also been destroyed by the explosion there. If he had been inside just now, maybe he was ruined too. Fortunately, holding the blue light screen on the outside, Justin let out a sigh of relief. He was glad to have saved his life. Yeah, luckily you climbed out, otherwise how much trouble would it have been for me to go in and catch you later? Just as Justin breathed a sigh of relief, he found himself being lifted up by a huge force. In a blink of an eye, he saw that it was a woman who had done it. Hey, what do you want to do? Do you know who I am? A classic remark about asking for a beating. Black Widow also met Justin's potential request and punched him directly, making him immediately submissive. Tisk, it's as exciting here as Tony's. Even Robert was attracted by the scene of Natasha Romanoff beating up Justin. Beautiful women and normal men with strength always like the same thing. It just so happens that Robert is a super normal man, so he likes them both. Tell me why you organized this terrorist attack. Natasha Romanoff grabbed Justin's hair and pushed him against the blue light screen. Even so, she still asked him to speak. Well, I didn't do it. It was Ivan. Being pressed against a light curtain similar to the wall, Justin tried hard to argue for himself even though his face was a little deformed. Justin's ability to mix up to this level is not entirely dependent on luck. Although he has never learned Natasha Romanoff's obviously military grappling techniques, he has seen a lot. He immediately understood that this woman was probably from the military. What did Justin Industries rely on to develop to this point? Isn't it the support of the military? Now that something like this happened to the drone armor manufactured by Justin Industrial, he certainly wanted to try his best to distance himself from the relationship in front of suspected military personnel. Of course, he really didn't know that Ivan would do this with him. To a certain extent, Justin was really wronged. Natasha Romanoff, Ivan, is that the lunatic from a few days ago? Shouldn't he be shot? Why is he here? Her words silenced Justin. His lies could be found out quickly by others, but if Justin was asked to tell the truth, he was a little confused. You said it or not? Natasha Romanoff has some experience in dealing with this kind of people. It can be said that she can know what Justin is thinking just from his expressions and movements, so she intensifies her efforts to interrogate him. I took a fancy to his reactor technology, so I paid people to get Ivan out. Humph, where is he now? Justin's words are very different from Natasha Romanoff's own estimation. Think about it, it's him. What else can Justin do for saving a madman besides profit? In my high-end factory in Queens, I sent someone to watch him before coming to the expo. Natasha Romanoff, obviously the people you sent didn't have any effect. As she spoke, she loosened her grip and put Justin down, then looked at the two steel armors that were still shooting at each other in the blue light screen and said. Justin also turned his attention to the battle inside and said with some embarrassment. Please believe me, this is not my intention. Go talk to the police, Mr. Justin. As soon as Natasha Romanoff walked away, Pepper came over with several police officers. No, what, are you talking about arresting me? Justin pointed at himself in disbelief. Obviously he still didn't think he was wrong. Yes sir, you are under arrest. It wasn't until the police put handcuffs on his hands that he realized the reality. Okay, I will cooperate with your investigation, but if someone wants to frame me, I won't touch a drop of that dirty water. When passing by Pepper, Justin even said mockingly. Very good, Pepper. You have learned how to eliminate your opponents, which proves that you are a qualified CEO. After Justin was taken away by the police, Robert had nothing to watch and could only turn his eyes to the two people who were shooting at each other. To be honest, it was boring. Tony, my energy is about to run out. I feel like this won't work. I'm afraid your energy isn't enough either, right? Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes looked at the only few pieces of information he knew, reminding Tony that, to be honest, this feeling of being manipulated made him very uncomfortable. Tony, just keep doing this, I still have a lot of energy left. Tony looked at the remaining energy reported by Jarvis in real time. After 10 minutes of high energy output, Rhodes' palladium had little energy left as the reactor source. But Tony's new element-based reactor still has a lot of energy left, and even the consumption just now was less than 10%. Good. Rhodes listened to Tony's words. Even though he couldn't move now, he still supported the other party verbally, but unfortunately he had no control after all. Ha, you want to just waste it like this? I just won't let you do it. Ivan, who was in front of the control computer, smiled and turned on all the weapon switches of the war machine, aiming them all at Tony. Obviously, he did not intend to compete with him for energy reserves. Robert, you're not going to just watch me being beaten to death, are you? You fool, you've been watching the show since you put a cover here. When Tony saw that he was being targeted by a weapon similar to a close-range anti-cannon, plus a bunch of micro-shells, he was a little panicked, so he quickly called for foreign aid, but the method was a little special. Why didn't you call me when you were acting cool and cool just now? After listening to Tony's words, Robert stopped. He applied the power of space to the war machine, making it immobile, and then walked up to Tony to argue with him. Okay, I admit it, you won. As a result, Robert was interrupted before he even started to output, and Tony, who had always been competitive, actually gave up this time. Seemingly seeing the confusion on Robert's face, Tony said with a speechless expression behind his armor. Please, I have to put a lot of effort into a situation that you can easily control. With such a huge disparity in strength, do you think I am a fool and would conflict with you? When Tony said this, he opened his mask, allowing Robert to see him rolling his eyes. It felt as if everything he just said was sarcastic. Dang dang. After knocking on the war machine, Tony asked Rhodes inside. Brother, are you okay? I think it would be great if we could keep it this way. Since the sound outlet was closed, only part of Rhodes' voice came out, but it was enough for people to hear clearly. You're fine, buddy. Tony finally breathed a sigh of relief, but Robert had already condensed a large ball of space power in his hand. When Tony glanced at it from the corner of his eye, he was immediately startled. Oh. Calm down, brother. If I said something wrong just now, can I apologize to you? There is no need to make you want to kill me, right? Tony took 2 steps back. Robert held the space power that he had rolled into a ball in his hand and felt that Tony had misunderstood him. I didn't mean to hit you. Do you still remember the agreement we made? You said you would study the principle of this thing for me and benefit the whole world. Do you remember? Robert explained, and finally Tony, who was always ready to dodge, believed him. Wiping the little sweat on his face, Tony complained speechlessly. You can take it out after I get back to the lab, not now. This is very inappropriate, you know. Robert, I didn't expect you to be so timid. Tony, I'm a coward. That doesn't exist, believe it or not. Hey guys, I think you can pay attention to my situation first. My armor seems to be shut down. Seeing that the two were about to get into a dispute, Rhodes made his presence felt at the side. At this moment, his mecha no longer glowed and looked like it had no energy. Tony and Robert looked at each other and decided to focus on the issues here first. Why don't you turn that thing off and give it a try? Tony pointed to the blue energy on the stalled war machine and said to Robert, obviously he wanted to know more about the situation. Okay, the power of space was not turned off, but was taken away by Robert. The moment he took away the energy, the war machine fell to the ground in a daze. Ha, I caught it. Fortunately, Tony's quick eyesight and quick hands stopped the war machine, otherwise Rhodes would really have had close contact with the ground. Stark. Suddenly a connection line appeared in front of Tony, and after the connection, Natasha Romanoff's face appeared on the opposite side. Tony. Oh, nice to meet you again, Natasha Romanoff. Romanoff agent. He is smiling all over his face now, and people who don't know may actually take Tony's words as good words at a glance. Natasha Romanoff. Thank you, it's an honor to see you again. Of course she could hear the sarcasm and hostility in Tony's tone, but Natasha Romanoff didn't care and accepted it calmly as if she didn't know anything. Oh, it's really boring to talk to you. If my guess is right, you turned off Rhodes' mecha, right? Natasha Romanoff. I also find it boring to talk to you. Yes, I turned off Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes' mecha. I know what you want to ask next. Ivan had already escaped when I came. Tony. Then what do you do? Natasha Romanoff. Without the injection I gave you, how could you still be alive today? How come the new element has been found and your body seems to be back to health? Faced with Tony's question-like words, Natasha Romanoff responded without showing any weakness, and out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that Pepper also appeared on a communication screen, and she immediately had a plan to trick someone. Tony. That's not the reason for you to approach me, right? I think I can find new materials without you. Natasha Romanoff. Oh yes. You really had confidence in yourself at that time. This confidence was enough to prepare your own funeral, including finding someone to replace the CEO, letting one's good friends wear armor, etc. Do I need to list more? Natasha Romanoff has already seen Pepper's surprised expression on the other connection screen. Now that the hole has been dug, he is ready for someone to jump. HMPH. What do you know? I did that to make myself more focused. Tony, who didn't realize anything was wrong at all, was still preparing to talk, but suddenly a scream from beside him interrupted him. Is what she said true? When are you going to die? Why did I never know? What else are you hiding from me? Pepper finally couldn't help it anymore. She asked 3 times in a row, looking very anxious and nervous. These emotions should have appeared a long time ago, but she only felt it now because of someone's concealment. This made Pepper not only anxious and nervous, but also angry immediately, and began to question Tony. Pepper, why are you there? The scene was a little awkward at one point. Tony's facial expression was a little out of control, and Natasha Romanoff almost laughed out loud while sitting in her chair. Were you about to die before? Why did you never mention it to me? Do you treat me as an outsider, Tony? Pepper was doing crazy output on the side, while Natasha Romanoff and Rhodes were secretly watching the show. Robert was the only one at the scene who didn't know what was going on. What are you talking about? Robert was very curious when he saw the pained expression on Tony's face. He leaned closer to Tony, wanting to hear what happened, but Robert's move reminded someone. Pepper, let's talk next time, okay? Or after I solve the problem. As he spoke, Tony was about to cut off the communication, but the sound of, dang, not far away made his body suddenly stiffen. Robert, please open this blue cover. I have to go in and talk to Tony. Pepper shouted outside, and Robert heard clearly this time. The space shield he created was effective in blocking damage, but it was not very soundproof. No, don't Robert, I think it's better to wait until she calms down before going out. Tony saw Robert really making a move to open the protection, and immediately stopped him. Looking at the emotional Pepper outside, he really didn't know what to do. Dang, Robert, turn this thing on. Pepper was still shouting outside, feeling a little out of control for a while Robert was in a dilemma. At this moment, a breaker appeared. Robert, Tony, there is a missing drone approaching you quickly, no. Wait, he is not a drone and it is stronger. Natasha Romanoff stopped watching the show, and instead focused her gaze on the computer screen controlling the mecha. Now there was a mecha approaching with an energy density at least 3 times that of the mechas just now. Bump. As soon as Natasha Romanoff finished speaking, the sound of heavy objects hitting everyone sounded above their heads. It was a battle armor with extremely exaggerated armor thickness. Pepper was startled at this time, but Tony was relieved when he saw this, because he finally had enough time to think about countermeasures. Natasha Romanoff, can you help me open this thing? I can't keep lying here forever, can I? At this time, Rhodes noticed that the threat above the blue shield also stopped watching the show, and instead reminded Natasha Romanoff to turn on her armor. Natasha Romanoff. Oh, okay. This was something that she should have done early in the morning, but Natasha Romanoff actually forgot about it. She could only say that Tony was too attractive and distracted her attention. Don't be a coward, Tony. Come out and have a fight, or let me in. Above the space shield, above his head, Ivan's head emerged from the armor. He said what he just said in a teasing tone, as if he didn't understand the current situation at all. He's so arrogant. Let me solve this problem for you. As Robert spoke, the power of space in his hand began to condense. As long as he thought about it, Ivan would change from a complete person to an incomplete meatloaf in the next moment. Let us solve it, Robert. How are you, brother? Tony's mask was instantly put on by him, and after gesturing to Robert, he ran to pull Rhodes on the ground. Start up successfully. Following the prompts from the auxiliary AI in the war machine, its eyes also turned red, but this time the war machine was fully controlled by its driver, Rhodes. I think I can bro now. Rhodes got up from the ground, feeling the mecha under his control again, and the sense of power filled his body again, so he was now very confident. Robert. Tony stood with Rhodes in front. They all looked at Ivan at the top of the protective shield. Tony just shouted at the same time. Learn. Robert shouted back, and as his thoughts moved, the big guy above his head suddenly lost its support and fell down. Bang! The ground was shaken slightly by the smash, and a burst of smoke and dust filled the air, giving people a very handsome feeling. Well, then Tony, I'll go outside to eat popcorn first. When Robert saw this posture, wasn't a real fight about to break out. So he quickly got out of the protective shield to get the uneaten popcorn. No problem, just watch it. Oh, by the way, remember to help me protect Pepper. Okay. After gesturing towards Tony, Robert turned around and walked out of the hood. What he didn't know was that Ivan was looking at his back with fearful eyes. He actually knew very well that there was such a mysterious and strong man beside Tony, but hatred almost blinded his eyes. Perhaps there is no chance at all. Intentionally or unintentionally, Ivan glanced at the drones destroyed by Tony on the ground, and Ivan, who had already prepared a backup plan, thought to himself. Robert, why did you come out? Tony and the others are not in danger, right? As soon as he came out of the protective shield, Pepper came up and asked. Robert waved his hand and took the unfinished popcorn that was placed in the sky, stuffed a few popcorn into his mouth and then said. Well, Tony may be under a lot of pressure recently, and maybe he wants to vent. Don't worry, he'll be fine while I'm here. In view of Robert's reliable performance before, Pepper still believed in his words this time. After nodding, he quickly turned around to check the fighting situation in the protective shield. Ha! Ivan took his long whip and swung it, knocking Tony and Rhodes to the ground. Both of them were restrained by him at this time. Tony, I followed your advice and improved the reactor. From this point of view, even I have to admit that you are a genius. Ivan, who thought he had a chance to win, began to show off like a winner, just like Tony did when he first attacked Tony and was caught. At that time, he taught Ivan how to improve the reactor in a victor's state, but the scene was. Makes the memory fresh. Is what he said true? Did you really teach him? Rhodes asked Tony with question marks on his face. He didn't understand if his friend was really crazy, otherwise why would he go to exchange technology with the enemy? Tony, everything he said was true, but I thought he was about to be shot, you know. Who knows which stupid pig rescued him again? He is now wrapped around the neck by a whip with huge energy, which may be regarded as self-inflicted consequences. If Tony had not told Ivan about the reactor technology, it would not be so complicated now. Are they going to die? Are you sure you won't take action yet? Pepper outside seemed to be experiencing the battle inside firsthand. She would be happy when Tony knocked Ivan down, but when Tony was restrained by Ivan, she was so nervous that her palms became sweaty. Pepper was not the only one at the scene who had the idea of letting Robert take action. Rhodes could no longer stand it at this time. Seeing the reminder that the armor was about to be penetrated, he quickly said to Tony. Obviously this is not something we can solve. It might be better to let Colonel Robert solve it, what do you think? Rhodes' situation was like this, and Tony was not much better, especially when Ivan focused on him. I think this is a good idea. Ivan. Don't even think about calling for rescue. The mask of the mecha with several times thicker armor that Ivan was driving suddenly opened, as if he was afraid that Tony and the others wouldn't be able to hear him. Snapped. Robert slapped his forehead. No need, Ivan is already cold. He really didn't understand what this person was thinking. When victory was clearly within their grasp, they insisted on committing suicide. If Robert hadn't been here, Ivan might have been able to kill Tony if he had been steady, but now he didn't have that chance. Hey, Rod, do you remember the birthday party and that action we just did? Obviously Tony also observed that Ivan wanted to die. His original intention of letting Robert take action was also extinguished. Now he has the confidence to solve the problem. Tony and the others can solve the problem without me taking action. After Robert said this outside the hood, he stuffed another big mouthful of popcorn into his mouth. He also wanted Pepper to eat some, but she didn't have that intention at the moment. Instead, she looked inside without blinking. Condition. Is there any change? What I see is that Tony and the others are still at a disadvantage. As soon as Pepper finished speaking, Tony inside had another small exchange with Rhodes, who had reacted. It seemed like the two were fighting, but in fact, boom, there was an explosion of huge amounts, which was almost expected because the two people who carried it out had experienced it many times. Man, you are so confident. After the dust caused by the explosion dispersed, Tony and Rhodes walked over to check on Ivan and found that his armor was all in good condition, except that the head without a mask was seriously injured. Ahem. Hey, do you think you won? Ivan only had one breath left at this time. Even when he was about to die, he still refused to admit that he had failed again. Instead, he insisted that Tony had lost. Ha ha ha, you lost. This time I win again. Tony, man, if you have another life, I suggest you have your brain checked as soon as you are born, you know. There may be something wrong with it that even you don't know about. He didn't understand. Ivan was almost dead and fell to the ground. He didn't know where he got the courage to say that Tony had lost. Dip. 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 Ivan smiled and said nothing at Tony's words. He just looked at him, and suddenly the reactor on his chest began to flash red. He's going to blow himself up. Get down, Tony. Dee dee. Rhodes, who was experienced in this area, quickly pulled Tony to lie down far away from Ivan, but suddenly there were more and more beeping sounds around him, which made Rhodes feel almost desperate. Robert, Tony's desire to survive is still stronger. He can still analyze calmly and know what is most effective now. Boom. A shocking explosion sounded. The power of dozens of small reactor explosions is no joke. Their individual power is definitely not inferior to missile explosions. Ah, Robert. Pepper's face turned pale with fright outside. She grabbed Robert's shoulders and almost dropped the popcorn. Hey, be careful, okay, Nuo and the others are out. Robert quickly protected his popcorn, but fortunately it was only a little spilled and the situation was not too bad. Ahem, perhaps it was because Robert opened the space shield that the smoke inside spread out, causing Pepper to choke on the dust and cough repeatedly. Robert, you are not a gentleman at all. Tony walked out of the dust in the sky. When he saw Pepper being affected by the dust, he glanced at Robert with some complaints, then quickly ran over and picked up Pepper and took her to an area away from the smoke and dust. Robert, but a layer of faint blue energy filled his body. That was the reason why Robert could breathe easily in the dust. He clearly remembered that he had also arranged it for Pepper, right? Colonel Robert, although I admire and respect your strength, I don't think you did it very well just now. Even Rhodes came to kill him, but Robert couldn't bear the injustice, so he pulled Rhodes and chased him in the direction Tony just walked. Tony, I really didn't expect you to hide such an important thing from me. Do you treat me like an outsider? Robert and Rhodes saw this scene as soon as they arrived at the scene. At this time, Pepper's tone usually didn't look like his face was covered in dust. Look, I've done everything I need to do. In front of the three people, Robert removed the power of space from Pepper. The reason why he did this was to keep his innocence in the world. Pepper, oh, Robert, I'm sorry that I acted just now. Thank you very much for your careful care, but in order to prevent Tony from avoiding me, I can only think of this way. The person involved's proactive explanation further confirmed that Robert was doing things well. At this point, Rhodes and Tony couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Don't look anywhere else, Tony. You haven't answered my question yet. Pepper said so, but the place she looked at was where Robert and Rhodes were standing. It was obvious that she didn't want those two people to be present. Oh, I remember, I still have things to deal with. Goodbye, Tony. After receiving the eviction signal, Rhodes consciously found a lame excuse to evacuate the scene, not caring about his friend's eyes that looked like he was asking for help. After Rhodes flew away, Robert was the only outsider present, so Pepper naturally targeted him. Well, I actually have something to do with Tony, so I gave this thing to him, by the way. Robert said, condensing a blue ball of light into his hand. This is the technology he now wants Tony to develop so that he can become a rich man again. No, I'll hand it over to him for you. As he spoke, Pepper reached out and took the blue ball of light. In order not to appear abrupt, Robert condensed several patterns on it. It would not be an exaggeration to call it a luminous basketball. No, don't touch it. When Tony saw that Pepper was about to encounter the blue ball, he quickly wanted to stop it. After all, he had seen with his own eyes how powerful Robert's blue energy was. He could devour a whole living person and ask normal people who wouldn't be afraid. What's the matter? Are you trying to change the subject again, Tony? At this time, Pepper had successfully got the ball in his hand and did not suffer any damage. Tony, this is where I have gathered my energy. You can conquer it as soon as possible. I'll wait for you to make money together. Seeing the situation at the scene, Robert had no chance to talk to Tony alone for a short time, so he simply finished what he wanted to say in front of Pepper, then opened a space door and went to Belinda's house. At this time, Belinda and her mother were having dinner. Belinda was not surprised by Robert's sudden appearance, but her mother was really shocked. The latest technology. Robert explained, and then Belinda played a video of Tony demonstrating technology in the White House before her mother believed it. Today's science and technology are developing too fast. Under the influence of the video, she also believed that Robert was using technology. After all, this was a more reasonable explanation. Today's news, please see the latest reports. Due to unknown reasons, the executive prosecutor of the National Bank, California, and other high-level political figures in the region have died one after another, resulting in riots in various places, but they have been brought under control. After the TV news broadcasts the news in a flash, they just skip it without saying much. Often, the briefer the report, the bigger the story behind it. I'll go down to the balcony. After all, these things were caused by Robert, so of course he had to go out and take care of it, so after reaching the balcony, he dialed Fury's phone number. Doo-doo. Hello, I'm calling to see how things are going. Do you need my help? Fury. Thank God, you actually took the initiative to call and ask. This is something I didn't expect. He started with a familiar wave of ridicule, but because the other person was wiping his own ass, Robert couldn't bear to argue with him, and Fury then resumed his normal speaking tone. Don't worry, we can solve your problem, not to mention the help of a group of people who claim to be mages. Their power is really powerful. Almost none of my people are their opponents. I actually want to ask where they came from. Fury was very confused by this. It stands to reason that he has controlled S.H.I.E.L.D. for many years, and he believed that even if he had no control over the uncertain factors on a global scale, he could still know their exact location. However, after those mages appeared, Fury doubted himself. Fury. It's like they came out of the ground, and there's no trace at all. Robert. Of course, the leader of these people is an old monster who has lived for hundreds of years. I advise you not to provoke them. Fury. Do you look at me like a fool? As long as these people don't destroy the world, why should I provoke them? But what should be said should not be said. These people seem to be taking this opportunity to help you eliminate dissidents. Many people in the government who are not clean and have privately said that you will not talk to them have been dealt with. I estimate that it will not be long before the United States may have a new Major General. Come on, I'm not interested in this. Robert had no interest in Fury at all. Now he was only interested in money. It was an obsession he had in his previous life, and of course he couldn't give up easily. As for other things like false names, they are not attractive to him at all, and they are useless. Well, you may be the only one who can remain so calm when he heard that he was going to be promoted to Major General. Fury said before hanging up the phone. After the call ended, Robert felt relaxed after knowing that Ancient One had really sent someone to handle his matter. Now he only had two things on his mind, namely eating and taking a phone call. Tony, why didn't you tell me? You could have said it and we'd have to bear it together. But you didn't. What made you do this? Do you remember when you said I was the best, so you handed over the company to me? But to be honest, I'm really too tired. I worry every day whether you will do something to cause the company to collapse, and now there is something new, that is, I worry about whether you will suddenly disappear that day or die directly. Pepper's words became more and more excited. Tony hurriedly hugged her and tried to stabilize her mood, but he didn't expect that this would have the opposite effect. Okay, Tony, now that you have recovered your health, you can continue to control the company. I am applying for resignation. There is too much pressure on me these days. Although Pepper resisted the hug just now, Tony still knew some of her thoughts from some of her subtle movements, so he began to persuade her in a gentle voice. You don't need to resign. Do you remember what you are holding in your hand? I will have to focus on it for a long time. I believe that as long as I successfully research that thing, its value will probably exceed several Stark Industrial stocks now. The sum of its worth. And you, Pepper, are the cornerstone for me to complete this great cause. Quietly, Tony put a hand on the other person's shoulder. This time, Pepper surprisingly did not resist, but fell into his arms somewhat submissively. There was a smile on the corner of Tony, a veteran of the flowers. The night was beautiful tonight, and the stars in the sky and the full moon hanging high all proved this point. I don't know if it was in New York or California, but a harsh bird call pierced the night sky, making people think. Asgard. Thor. Brother, you shouldn't do this. Loki. I'm not your brother, never have been. Humph. Waving his scepter, Thor was knocked away. He didn't even think about resisting and was still preparing to persuade Loki. Ha ha. Put away your cheap hypocrisy, Thor. Do you know how much I have envied you since I was a child? Why can you be the crown prince and I can't? Everything I did today was to let my father and everyone in the divine realm see that I, Loki, can become a better lord of the divine realm than you. Loki's words made Thor even more reluctant to hit him. He could actually see the envy of his younger brother since he was a child. He didn't understand it when he was a child, but Thor can understand it now. Listen, Loki, we can sit down and talk. We can talk about these issues when father recovers. Thor tried to control his brother's emotions as much as possible, but Loki didn't want that. Loki, are you so unwilling to fight me? Are you afraid of hurting me? Ever since you were little, you have always regarded me as a loser who is weaker than you. Now pick up your hammer and fight. I want to prove you to God's domain and my father, but that's all. After saying that, he waved his magic staff and hit Saul directly in the abdomen. Even though he hit Thor so hard, he didn't even fight back. Hey, if you continue not to take action, I might be able to reluctantly kill you and then go to the mortal world to find your old sweetheart. Let me think about it. Her name is Jane, right? Seeing that he was too strong, Loki used a direct provocation method, which made Thor's eyes filled with thunder. Even if Loki had the scepter, he could not escape the fate of being defeated by Thor. As soon as the opponent's power of Thor exploded, Loki himself was knocked away. Bang bang, he directly transformed into a ball and rolled on the Rainbow Bridge. Just when he was about to fall into the vast universe, Loki's desire for survival burst out and he tightly grasped the edge of the Rainbow Bridge. Save me, Thor. Seeing his cry for help, he was greeted by Thor's hesitation. Brother, I know I was wrong, please help me. A trace of hatred flashed in Loki's eyes, but it was quickly covered up. Looking at the hesitant Thor, he directly launched his ultimate move. Thor, okay, but you have to promise not to act like this again. In fact, he never thought about giving up his brother. The reason why he made a hesitant expression just now was just to let Loki reflect on it. I will. Seeing Thor reaching out to pull him, Loki's eyes became fierce, and he actually wanted to pull the other person into the abyss of the endless universe when he was helping him. Loki. Thor was really succeeded by the opponent when he was unprepared, but Loki also made a mistake. He seemed to have overestimated himself. It's okay now. Our lives are hanging by a thread. Loki held Thor's leg tightly with one hand, while Thor held the edge of the Bifrost tightly with his hand. For some unknown reason, the gravity under the Rainbow Bridge is quite strong. If only Thor was alone, he could go up by himself, but at this time he still had Loki hanging on his leg. Faced with Thor's complaints, Loki showed no remorse. Loki, obviously you are such a waste and failed to save me, so you still have the nerve to blame me for causing this situation. Thor, you are so shameless. He was about to give a stern rebuttal, but after thinking about it, he seemed to have never taken advantage of Loki's words, so he finally gave up and started to focus on more practical topics. How come the attraction under the Rainbow Bridge is so great today? Thor wanted to go to the Rainbow Bridge on his own, but the endless gravity in the universe made it useless no matter how hard he tried. Don't bother Thor, only one of us can survive. I think that person will be me, right? As he spoke, Loki used Thor as a rope to climb up, but his strength was not as good as Thor's. He was even more defeated in the face of the strong gravity. Not only did he fail to step on Thor to a safe place, but he almost lost his life. People fall. Thor, if you still don't want to die, just hurry up. He felt his brother's small movements. At this time, Thor's hand holding the Rainbow Bridge was trembling slightly, which was due to Loki's little cleverness just now. My children, I think you have had enough trouble now. Suddenly, above Tony and Loki, Odin, the Lord of the Gods, appeared on the Rainbow Bridge. He grabbed Thor's hand and was about to pull them up. Father, you're awake. Do you know, I almost killed the leader of the ice giants before, and almost destroyed their home, Jordheim. The moment he saw Odin, Loki was like a child showing off his achievements to an adult, and all he wanted was a word of affirmation. No, Loki, that's all nonsense. However, reality is often cruel. Loki looked at Odin expectantly. The appreciation he originally wanted was not mentioned by the other party, but was denied instead. Thor, Loki, no. Don't. After listening to Odin's words, the light in Loki's eyes disappeared, replaced by a look of grey defeat. At the same time, his grip on Thor's leg began to loosen. No wonder Thor is so nervous. Although Loki has done many things that disgust him, after all, they have been brothers together since childhood. How can Thor break up with him? Odin, no. Even though he was the Lord of the Gods, he could only save Thor alone, and there was nothing he could do for Loki, who was already determined to die. In the early morning of the next day, Robert woke up from the arms of a pair of lotus roots. He looked at the people around him and realized that he might not be able to accompany him to school today. Hey, it's not good for a man to be too strong. To be honest, Robert didn't even have much fun, and Belinda couldn't stand it. Ring ring ring. Suddenly a phone rang, interrupting Robert. His first reaction was to quickly silence the phone, for fear of disturbing Belinda's rest next to him. Unexpectedly, such a loud ringing sound only made Belinda turn over and continue to sleep. She must be tired. Robert looked at Belinda and felt guilty in his heart. After looking at the call on his cell phone, he saw it was from Fury. The other party probably had something important to do. Robert didn't think the other party would be bored and make this call. On the balcony, hello, what do you want from me? Fury, you were so slow to answer the phone. I thought I was going to call again. You have something to say. Robert didn't have much time to talk nonsense with the other party. In fact, Robert wouldn't have even planned to answer the call if he hadn't seen that the other party might be dealing with the incident he had caused before. Fury, you are such a cold person. Do you know that I stayed up until early in the morning working on your affairs? Because of your impulsiveness, the United States has fallen into an unprecedented crisis. Dozens of rebel and independent forces have risen. If it weren't for the help of your mage friends and S.H.I.E.L.D., you might have seen a country today. A dozen governments emerged. Fury complained bitterly on the phone, but Robert understood the crux of the problem, which was the human problem, which was easy to solve for him. You just need to tell me the exact location of those forces. Robert's cold voice rang on the phone. Fury, who was sitting in the S.H.I.E.L.D. building, looked at the satellite images displayed on the computer in front of him and curled his lips. This is what I've been waiting for. Fury thought in his mind, and then told Robert the names and addresses of the two most difficult forces to deal with. Keto Scott is the actual controller of the California National Guard. As an old antique, you may not understand the situation in California. Let me give you a brief explanation first. Following Fury's explanation, Robert learned that California is the economic continent of the United States. It is not only the largest producer of vegetables and fruits in the United States, but also has many cutting-edge technology companies rooted here. Many companies such as Pinguo, Google, Intel, Facebook, etc. are all located in California. As a result, they have become one of the most developed states in the United States, or none. Fury emphasized California's strength on the phone, but there was something Robert didn't understand. By the way, doesn't the law in the United States stipulate the number of National Guards that each state can control? What's so scary about just a few people? Robert's question made Fury laugh out loud on the phone. Fury. Ha, Robert, are you naive, or are you just as stupid as those careerists in California? Don't forget that they still have the uncontrolled option of reserve service. According to our agent's report, there are 600,000 combat-capable reserve forces in California, plus the active National Guard, and due to abundant funds, their equipment is not even inferior to that of the Ace Army, and even the daily training intensity is not bad. Quote, "This is just a problem facing Fury. The people in California want independence and they have 600,000 troops to support them, but there is someone who is more troublesome than them. Fury. This is just one of them. Kiddo Scott is a trickier thing than the guy just now. He even has the ability to mobilize the finances and military of several states." Then Fury gave another introduction. Robert interrupted him after listening to half of it, and directly told him his solution without asking any questions. "Just tell me the location of those people, remember to have accurate coordinates." Fury. "What do you want to do?" Robert. "Just tell me the coordinates." Fury looked at the image displayed by the military satellite on the computer. It was Kiddo Scott in California who was speaking in a military camp. Just from the images taken by satellites at an altitude of 10,000 meters, we can see that the crowds at the scene were very excited, and it looked like they were planning something big. Today's United States has become a drag on the people of California. Joining the federal government will not benefit us at all, but it will have a lot of disadvantages. For example, it will bear nearly half of the country's fiscal expenditures to help backward states. I want to say that the people of California are not philanthropists. Our country's system puts private interests above all else. So in order to resist this infringement of our interests today, fighting back with a gun is the most correct choice. Kiddo Scott gave a passionate speech on the podium, while his loyal followers below aroused emotions in the group, making the tens of thousands of National Guard soldiers present excited. However, what they did not know was that the Death God had quietly approached. Fury. The positioning is given to you, so how can I watch the performance next? Robert. Look with your eyes. As he spoke, the blue light generated by the power of space on his body covered him. Almost instantly, whether it was on Fury's computer or the people in the military base where Kiddo Scott was speaking, they all saw a huge blue hole appeared that blocked the sky. Oh, Robert, do you have to use this trick? Maybe we have a better choice. Fury was frightened when he saw the blue hole, which was so huge that tens of thousands of people could disperse and run away for more than 10 minutes. He really didn't know how strong Robert had become. Simple and efficient solution. If Director Fury has any better ideas, maybe he can come up with it, but you have to hurry up. Otherwise, Kiddo Scott, that California independent criminal, would have escaped. At the end of the conversation, Robert reminded Fury. Whatever I can do, I am just trying to scare the snake away. He complained in his heart, Fury now knows that the arrow is already on the string, so where is the reason to withdraw it? Fury. Hey, just follow your plan, but you'd better try to minimize the damage to the ground. Robert. I think if you could finish the story in one breath, the 300-meter deep pit on the ground would not have appeared. Obviously you have an unshakable responsibility for this. Fury. Oh my God, what have you done? Looking at the huge crater revealed on the satellite image when the blue light dissipated, Fury could tell that it was a crater even from a bird's eye view, and it was very big, let alone the feeling of a person walking up close. If you don't mention anything else, just talk about whether the matter has been completely resolved or not. Robert's words made Fury choke on what he wanted to say next. and it wasn't until he thought about it for a long time that he had to admit it. It seems like a good solution. Now that the largest warlord in California has been eliminated, the situation there will be much easier to control. In fact, it's not that S.H.I.E.L.D. and the US federal government can't defeat the local armed forces, but it's one thing to be able to defeat them, and another thing to be willing to fight. Fortunately, Robert helped them solve this problem. Robert, there seems to be another troublesome guy, right? Now you tell me his location, and I can solve it easily. For him, this kind of thing is as easy as drinking water. Those big shot Robert who many people need to look up to on weekdays has never thought of spoiling them. Fury, if you still want to do it in the same way, I advise you to wait. The target is in New York City now. He is very cautious and we cannot obtain his location for the time being. So unless you destroy the entire New York, just wait for a while. I will call you when my people are sure to lure him out. After saying that, Fury didn't seem to want to say another word to Robert and hung up the phone directly. Ring ring ring. Unexpectedly, the phone rang again just after hanging up. Robert looked impatiently at who was calling and found that it was not Fury, but Tony. Hey, what were you doing just now? Why are you making so many calls but it's still showing as in the call? Tony's complaints came from the phone, and Robert smiled and joked. A braised egg was talking to me on the phone just now. To be honest, the experience was really terrible, especially in the morning which represents a new day. Tony, are you talking about braised eggs referring to people? Sorry, maybe I shouldn't ask this, but I really don't know about braised eggs. What Robert didn't expect was that Tony couldn't get the point of his joke due to cultural differences, so he could only clearly tell who Lou Dan was. Fury called me early in the morning. To be honest, he has no eyesight. It's so early in the morning. Tony. Oh, it's him. What kind of braised egg thing is this? He also made an appointment with me to meet in an abandoned warehouse in the afternoon. To be honest, I'm a little confused. Why does he want to imitate the coolness in movies? You can come to my company or go to their S.H.I.E.L.D. and we can chat. Robert, there is something wrong with him. Tony. Agreed. The two reached a consensus on this matter, and at the same time Fury, who was thousands of miles away, started sneezing wildly, as if he was cursed. Robert. Okay, let's get back to the normal topic. Why are you calling me? Have you already researched my ability? When talking about this question, Tony, who was still laughing just now, suddenly paused and his tone began to become a little lower. It's not that it's been researched. In fact, the reality is just the idea. Forget it, you'd better come to my laboratory in person. I'll explain it to you personally. It is not difficult to tell from Tony's tone that he must have encountered some difficult problem to solve. In order to continue to realize his previous dream of getting rich, Robert hurriedly came to Tony's laboratory non-stop. What happened? You seem to be in a little trouble. Looking at Tony, whose hair was shaped like a chicken coop, Robert asked curiously. After he relaxed for a while last night, he started to study the thing you gave him. Oh, now it seems that this is really not a good idea. At this time, Pepper also came over with 2 breakfasts. Although Robert had a share, he felt that the other party's eyes from time to time seemed to be full of complaints towards him. I didn't do anything. Could it be? Robert immediately thought of a possibility, so he couldn't help but glance at Tony and Pepper, as if he wanted to see something on their faces. Why are you looking at us like that? Pepper herself felt a little embarrassed, but she seemed to glance at Tony intentionally before bowing her head shyly. Don't look around, Pepper and I are already together. From today on, the colorful world outside is destined to be far away from me. Tony's actions undoubtedly gave Pepper a reassurance, reassuring her that Tony would not treat her like he did to others, the kind that would be cleaned up after one use. Muma. Pepper kissed Tony on the face in front of Robert, and the unpleasant expression on his face improved a lot. Fortunately, the interaction between the two of them was nothing more than that. They obviously did not treat Robert as an airhead. Eat well, dear. After saying that, he left with a happy pace. What happened? After Pepper left, Robert picked up his breakfast politely and ate it as if no one else was watching. At the same time, he asked Tony, who was almost eating. Tony, the existing technology cannot reproduce your special ability at all. This is something I learned after I got the blue ball last night and conducted research on it. Robert seems to have kept things simple. Tony's expression was a little depressed. He seemed to have difficulty accepting his failure, but the result was right in front of him and he had to admit it. Robert, in that case, it doesn't matter. At least I tried hard. Although his mood was a little low, considering that Tony had been busy all night, Robert still couldn't bear to put more pressure on him. Tony, it can't be said that there is no progress at all, no. This is a storage board I made with my new elements. It can store some energy. As long as you inject your own energy into it and then specify it, maybe it can be used for 2 or 3 years. But unfortunately, because I can't copy your ability, it is destined to not be mass-produced. Tony said to Robert while chewing the bread. Robert, yeah, well, don't be discouraged. You will definitely find more opportunities in the future. Wait, please make sure what you just said. Robert was about to comfort Tony again, but suddenly he remembered what the other party said before, although the reflex arc was a bit long. Tony, say what again? That's what you just said. This energy plate can be used for 2 or 3 years with 1 injection of energy, right? Robert grabbed the point and asked. Tony, yeah, but its energy can only be provided by you, which means that although the storage board can be produced on the assembly line, your ability cannot. I can't think of draining you dry. Seeing that there was still a feeling of eagerness in Robert's eyes, Tony quickly poured another basin of cold water on him. If this thing goes on sale, it will definitely be very popular. Are you sure you want to squeeze yourself dry to make that money? It has to be said that sometimes cleverness is always mistaken for cleverness. At this time, Tony was still thinking about the problem of making the product available to everyone, but Robert thought of a way. We don't have to sell things to everyone. In the early stage, we can sell them as high-end technology-based luxury goods. As for public transportation, we can cooperate with the government to build large-scale portals and put a special energy storage panel inside. Wouldn't the problem be solved? Tony, yeah, the so-called sudden enlightenment is just that, not to mention that under the circumstances that Robert said so clearly, Tony's IQ is not low, and his job is actually a businessman. This will undoubtedly make him more advantageous in grasping business opportunities. Before, he was blinded by a leaf, but now that the leaf is away, Tony's thinking can diverge. Tony, I already have an idea. Robert, you can stay here for a few days, or go back and wait for news from me. I think the result will be soon. At this time, his face regained its energy, the look of frustration disappeared, and Tony returned to his usual confident self. I'll go back and wait for you. After finding a solution to the matter, Robert left Tony's laboratory feeling relaxed. In fact, after possessing the eternal time ability, one of Robert's major shortcomings, the lack of physical ability, no longer exists. It can be said that as long as he doesn't mind the pain, he can destroy half the universe now. After saying hello to Tony, Robert opened a space door and arrived outside Midtown High School. He did not choose to stay at Tony's house for a few days, although it would be more convenient for him, and he would know the results as soon as they came out, but Robert was very discerning. If I stay there tonight and my diaphragm is broken and I touch someone, I'm afraid she will even want to kill me. Reminiscent of Pepper's expression before, Robert could understand from some of the other party's words that Tony seemed to be holding a ball to do research after finishing last night. Tisk, how can he still be considered a playboy? Without the aura of a billionaire, Tony might just be a steely straight man with a super high IQ. As Robert walked toward the campus, he teased Tony behind his back. After all, in his impression, normal people basically couldn't do such a thing. Ring ring ring. The ringtone of the cell phone rang without warning. Robert, who was secretly laughing at Tony, picked it up and saw that it was Fury calling. Reminiscent of the conversation this morning, he felt that there was a high probability that this was a call from the dead. Robert, hello, Fury. The target has been led to the suburbs by my people, but their protective power is too strong. I can't kill him without anyone knowing. You have to do it. Fury, he is now led to the suburbs of New York City by our people. This will be the only chance. Robert, don't you still believe me? Don't worry, it's not a big problem. Have your people come out. The performance is about to begin. Fury, the coordinates are, let's get started. I don't want this person to exist for a second. As you wish. Robert waved, and the space instantly shook. In the suburbs of New York, a group of people who were originally searching for something were swallowed up by space teleportation. Let your people go over and take a look. If the information you gave is correct, that person has been solved. Robert said something into the phone, and Fury immediately replied. Actually, my people are looking at it with a telescope. They handled it very cleanly, Robert. It will be much easier to solve next. Robert, if nothing happens, I'll hang up first. Fury, oh, wait, there's one more thing. As he spoke, he picked up a document at hand and looked at it. It wasn't until Robert was almost impatient that he asked and continued. I have a plan called Avengers here. I wonder if you are interested in participating and serving as the top combat force. Robert, not interested. Fury, do. Unexpectedly, this was what Fury had been holding in for a long time. After hearing the Avengers plan, Robert hung up the phone without even giving Fury more time to speak. Oh, looking at the hung-up phone, Fury shook his head. He also knew that the probability of Robert agreeing was low. After all, the other party was not a person who liked to be restrained no matter how he looked at it. It seems that we can only act according to the original plan. Fury muttered, placing several lists of personnel on the other side in front of him one by one. Captain America, Natasha Romanoff, Barton, Banner and Tony Stark. It's just you. As he spoke, Fury picked up Tony's information and evaluation sheet. In the classroom at Midtown High School. Robert, you have missed too many courses. If you want to make up for it, you may have to take classes for a long time. Even with your talent, it will not be easy. The person who said this was Robert's friend Peter from Midtown High School, or he should be called Spider-Man, now. Robert, whatever, just learn whatever you can from it. He smiled nonchalantly, because academic qualifications were really not a problem for him. Robert could get into those prestigious schools that ordinary people were trying to grab as long as he wanted to. Even the country's top status and strength symbol automatically came to the door and invited him to join. Mr. Robert, please allow me to call you this and introduce myself. My name is Anthony, the current acting president. The purpose of my call is to sincerely invite you, Mr. Robert, to serve as a permanent member of Congress. And you have the power to participate in all affairs of the House of Representatives and the Senate. At the same time, because of your outstanding contribution to stabilizing the situation, General Freeman and I have unanimously decided to promote your military rank to the rank of Lieutenant General. A series of dazzling positions came to him. No matter how culturally different Robert was from the United States, he still knew the meaning of a permanent member of Congress and a lieutenant general. That is almost the pinnacle seat that represents political and military power in the United States. It is not something that ordinary people can just sit in. In fact, it is extremely difficult for normal people to have it. Anthony, Mr. Robert, do you accept these appointments? If there is anything inappropriate, please mention it to me and I will hold a meeting to revise it. Anthony's tone was not generally good. Rather than saying that he came to announce Robert's appointment, it would be more appropriate to say that he came to please him. But think about it, now Robert has killed the big ones who dislike him in the United States, while some small and medium-sized ones have been dealt with by Ancient One. The main purpose of doing this was to fear that Robert would destroy the world if he didn't go his way. After several battles, Ancient One was no longer sure of defeating Robert, which was why she accommodated him so much. Well, that's okay, but do I still have the rank of Lieutenant General? Is there any army under my command? Robert was very satisfied with Anthony's attitude. He did not deliberately seek trouble but asked casually. In fact, it didn't matter if there was no army under his command. After all, he was too lazy to bother. But what Robert didn't expect was that Anthony's next step was to inform him of the powers he could use. Anthony, your lieutenant general rank is second only to General Freeman, so theoretically you can command all U.S. troops below your rank. As soon as he said the first half of his words, Robert thought that this lieutenant general was just a false name for him, but he really didn't care, so he wanted to express his gratitude politely, but Anthony didn't finish his words. But considering some special circumstances, we have met and discussed before and decided to hand over the control of the U.S. military in Asia to your hands. Robert, he really didn't expect that the President of the United States or those high-level officials would take him so seriously. You know, that is the control of the military of a continent. Anthony, Mr. Robert, do you have anything else to modify? Just as Robert thought, Anthony and the surviving American high-level officials behind him paid great attention to it, or to put it in a more clear way, they were cautious. After all, none of them who survive now want to become a miserable ghost like Lytton. Robert. Okay. Mr. President, I accept the appointment. When he came back to his senses, he immediately agreed to these conditions, which were all beneficial to him. After all, no one is a fool. Well, Lieutenant General Robert or Mr. Congressman, the 2 appointment documents will be delivered to you tomorrow. Anthony breathed a sigh of relief at first. He was afraid that Robert would make some excessive demands again, but it turned out that the other party was not very greedy. As for why the top leaders of the United States offered Robert such generous terms, part of the reason was the fear of death, and part of the reason was that they wanted to deeply tie Robert's interests to the United States. Only in this way can these people feel at ease. Okay, then I'll hang up first. After Robert finished speaking, he hung up the phone, and Anthony, who was sitting in the president's office of the White House, looked at the documents left by former President Lytton on the table, and it took a long time before he came back to his senses. If you knew this was the result, I'm afraid you would have carried it out despite all the pressure, instead of being stupid. After a long time, Anthony sighed slightly and said, and the execution document he was referring to actually contained the generous conditions mentioned by Anthony and Robert just now. When Lytton saw the opponent's extremely powerful strength, he had already made a decision with the senior executives, which was to let Robert join them and tie their interests. But then, because Robert was entangled by the Ancient One and disappeared for several months, some people began to have concerns. Perhaps his second shot was just to hold on. In fact, Robert was already at the end of his strength. This kind of remarks only appeared sporadically among high-level officials at the beginning, and most people were hesitant about it, including President Lytton. Just because that period of time disappeared, no one mentioned the things that Robert originally wanted to get. And as he disappeared for longer and longer, a kind of speech that strangled him in a period of weakness began to spread among the top management. Find and kill him. Anthony recalled that 5 months after Robert disappeared, even President Lytton could no longer hold back and directly issued an order to his subordinates to hunt down Robert. Thinking about it now, he felt a little emotional. Jingle bell. As the school bell rang, Robert stretched out, said hello to Peter and prepared to go back to Belinda's house. Mr. Congressman, we have been waiting for a long time. Are you going to the official residence prepared by the government for you now or somewhere else? Unexpectedly, Robert was greeted by a large group of people just after he walked out of the school gate. You must know that it was the time when school was over, so countless people's eyes were attracted. Oh, my God, did some big shot come to our school? Yeah, why are there so many police outside, and even the army is here? Hey, they seem to be here to pick up Robert. Really, look, he gets on the A8 in the middle. I heard early on that he was not an ordinary person, but I didn't expect him to be so extraordinary. The voices of the students talking about each other disappeared as Robert led Peter into the specially customized A8, leaving only the soothing music inside. Mr. Peter, the congressman said he would send you off first. What is the address? A person in front who seemed to be a secretary was questioning Peter, but Peter, who had never seen such a battle before, was completely stunned until Robert next to him touched him. I live in Queens. Peter quickly told his address, and the people in front of him immediately remembered it. After reporting it to the entire action team through the hidden intercom, the A8 slowly started to move. No, Robert, are they going to send me home? In fact, Peter began to regret it after telling him his address. The reason for this was that the battle to pick up Robert was simply too big. The A8 was protected by light armored vehicles on the left and right, with several mounted policemen clearing the way in front, and several police cars in the middle. Can you imagine a high school student returning home under the protection of such a formation? He will definitely be noticed by everyone, and Peter has never been someone who likes to show off, except in front of the goddess. Peter, Robert, I'm a little uncomfortable. It sounds like someone is very adaptable. That's what he said, but Robert's current posture is lying in an extremely relaxed posture. How can he not look relaxed at all? On the other hand, Peter, it's really hard to describe him as sitting upright. If things can't change, then you have to learn to relax, Peter. Robert put a hand on his shoulder, signaling Peter, who was sitting upright, to relax a little, but with little effect. I don't think it's a shame to go home in a team like this, right? Why are you so nervous? Robert had not been notified of these sudden arrivals today. Maybe this was a surprise that some people wanted to give him. After all, it was such a huge lineup, with both the May military and policemen on the battlefield, and the unparalleled sense of superiority it brought about was something that few people could resist, unless they were people like Peter who just wanted to keep a low profile. Report: there is an attack on the street 200 meters ahead. In order to avoid unnecessary complications and protect the safety of Mr. Congressman, please change the route immediately. Suddenly, a report sound appeared on the car intercom. Since the other party used the emergency frequency band to alert the people in the car, both Robert and Peter heard the news. Robert, you go first. Can I go down and use the toilet? Peter originally didn't want to go home in such a grand way under the protection of a large group of people. Peter, who was too lazy to explain to others, had long wanted to propose getting off the car, but he hesitated for a long time because he couldn't say it casually. But now the previous attack has given him more reasons to convince himself. After all, he is Spider-Man. I don't recommend you do this, Mr. Peter. There is a danger happening ahead. If you get off the car here. Before Robert could answer Peter, the secretary sitting in front spoke first. Although he had a certain purpose of completing the task, he still had the intention of caring about Peter. Let him go down, but Peter, you have to promise me not to run towards dangerous places. However, the secretary was interrupted by Robert before he finished speaking. He knew Peter's strength. As Spider-Man, anything 200 meters in front of Robert could hurt Peter. After all, if it is strong, it will not only be called an attack. Squeak. After Robert finished speaking, the secretary gestured to the driver beside him, and after notifying the entire fleet, the A8 stopped. The secretary did not rebel against Robert because the order he received was to accept the other party's orders unconditionally. Peter, thank you, Robert. After saying that, he hurriedly got out of the car before Robert could respond, as if he had something urgent to deal with. Sir, can we go? When Peter closed the car door, the secretary asked Robert. Well, let's go, just stop at the intersection in front of you. Go back wherever you came from. Also, I want to tell the person who arranged this battle, I actually don't like to be so high profile. Robert said, and the secretary in front recorded his words carefully. The motorcade continued to move, and stopped again after reaching the next intersection. Don't do this again. After closing the door, Robert walked towards where Peter was most likely to go. What should we do? On A8, the driver asked the secretary beside him. Although he is driving, he is definitely not just a driver. In fact, he is the safety commander of this operation and a senior agent. Secretary, what else can we do? Since Mr. Robert doesn't like this, let's go back and give it to him. The boss said we will accept his order unconditionally. All right, the team began to disband. They belong to several systems. In the current situation, it is quite appropriate to say that they all go back to their own homes. Guys, look at this. It's you again, Bug. As soon as Robert arrived at the scene of the attack, he saw Peter wearing a spider suit fighting with a Sandman. The so-called attack was actually Sandman robbing a cash transport truck. It's really useless. With such a strong ability, you can't even finish things quickly. Robert stood high and watched the show. While watching, he couldn't help but worry about Sandman's IQ. He obviously had a good hidden ability but chose the most ostentatious way to make money. While Spider-Man and Sandman were fighting, several police cars arrived on time, and there was no famous scene where the police only came after the matter was resolved. Put down your weapons immediately. A policeman arrived first. He picked up his gun and wanted to deal with Sandman like an ordinary robber. But in fact, the policeman realized something was wrong as soon as he said the words, because the man didn't seem to be armed at all. Roll. Sandman, who has long been tortured by Spider-Man and is so angry, how can he tolerate others trying to stop him? I saw one of his hands turn into a giant hammer and hit the police. Bang bang. 2 consecutive shots had little effect. The bullet could not cause any harm to Sandman because it would pass through his body as soon as it made contact. Spectators can watch outside the venue. Seeing that this American policeman was about to die gloriously in the line of duty, just when he was squinting and unable to do anything, Peter suddenly took action. His left hand spurted out a thread of spider silk, which slowed down Sandman's movement, while Spider-Man used it as a fulcrum to quickly approach. Go to hell. Bang. BBB. The police car was dented, and the police car escaped unharmed. However, the police car that was hit was not so lucky. It was directly dented by the Sandman, and the engine compartment was still emitting white smoke as if it was raining. It's like it's going to explode in a second. Gudong. The police who arrived at the same time couldn't help but start to retreat when they saw this situation. They never thought that they would die in the line of duty today. Hey, big guy, your opponent is here. In order to give the police time to evacuate, Peter provoked Sandman again. Roar. Perhaps after the mutation, Sandman has also lost a lot of his sanity, causing him to lose control of his emotions now, and he has to yell from time to time. Oh, wait, don't scream yet, let me try to see if this thing works. When Peter or Spider-Man was fighting with Sandman, he suddenly discovered a red fire hydrant on the side of the road. As expected of a top student, Peter, quick thinking, quickly came up with a solution, which was to use water. Big guy, let me see how strong you are. PFF'd. A thread of spider webbing struck Sandman's hand, and Spider-Man threw him towards the fire hydrant. Puff. Almost at the moment of contact, the fire hydrant snapped. Since he had been thrown by Spider-Man before, Sandman, who had never been hurt, took it lightly this time. He did not expect Peter to do this to him. As a huge amount of water was sprinkled on his body, Sandman's condensed shape instantly collapsed, and he was washed into the nearest sewer like garbage. If there was no chance to be dried, he would probably have to stay in there for a long time. So this is his weakness. Peter looked at Sandman, who was lost in the small waterway. What he was afraid of now was that the other party would continue to cause harm after getting out of trouble, but he really didn't know how to resist. Problem ending is done. Robert, who had no more time to watch the theater in the sky, stretched himself. After taking one last look at Peter, he left directly. The space door was opened, and Robert came directly to Belinda's house. When they were close to the battlefield last night, he tentatively shouted, "Belinda, are you awake?" After shaking slightly, the other party just hummed a few words, obviously not awake. Then what should we do next? Robert can't go to Tony's house again. Maybe he will encounter some secrets that cannot be seen by others now. If Robert is seen because of his sudden intrusion, there is no doubt that Tony will try to kill Robert no matter how difficult it is. This morning Hangguo has applied to UNESCO to list chopsticks as Hangguo's intangible cultural heritage. UNESCO has not responded yet, but Yingguo has taken the lead in expressing strong protest, and even China has stated that it does not agree with this application. The news reported what happened today. Belinda's mother seemed to have gone out to buy groceries, and Robert was left at home to change the TV channels, hoping to find something good to watch. But perhaps due to cultural differences, Robert really appreciated the Bremen-style TV series and some movies, which led him to switch back and forth and could only watch the news channel. Haha, Banksy country is really interesting. Why don't they say that the entire earth belongs to their country? On Sunday, he just wanted to laugh at this shameless behavior and was about to change the channel, but suddenly a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Seoul City. Robert came here through a space gate. Because the place was quite remote, not many people noticed him. Zybigui, but not much doesn't mean there is none. A young man from the cold country was frightened and panicked because he saw the whole process of Robert's appearance. What are you talking about? Hey, do you know where the cold base is? Robert currently speaks 2 languages, one is Chinese from his previous life, and the other is English from his current life. As for second-rate languages like Hanyu, he hasn't learned it yet, so he can understand the word, iya. When the yelling young man said it. Ghost, Zybeo, is there anyone here to save me? After Robert discovered that he had been seen, he quickly formed a space barrier around him, including himself and the young man. The effect is that people outside can neither see them nor hear them. What's this? Seeing that the young man's resistance became more and more fierce, Robert simply restrained his body, and then walked up to him and asked again, "Does anyone know Chinese or English?" But what responded to Robert was the struggle written all over the young man's face. He seemed to believe that Robert was a ghost. "Okay, how about we ask in another way?" As he spoke, he picked up a round stone from the roadside and applied the power of space to it, and a stone knife quickly took shape. Dang dang. The sound of gravel falling to the ground sounded, and the panic in the eyes of the young man from the Han country gradually turned into fear, because "I'll ask you again if I can understand you." The stone knife, which looked very sharp, was pressed against the young man's neck by Robert. He was filled with fear, but under the influence of the desire to survive, he was finally able to speak properly. "Young man, yes, I can, woo-woo." A fluent English came out of the other party's mouth, and the young man couldn't help crying after seeing Robert put down the knife because of this. Wouldn't it be over already? Robert looked at the young man from the Han country who had runny nose and tears, and patted his shoulder to express comfort. Unexpectedly, not only did this fail to comfort the other party, but it actually made him startled. Snapped. Robert didn't care whether the young man from the Han country in front of him was pretending to be scared or was really scared. He had no time to care about that. He just slapped the young man in the face without thinking. "Are you comfortable now?" Robert asked the young man who already had a dull look on his face. Seeing that the other man had not responded yet, he made another move in his hand. "Young man, I feel good, I feel good. Please don't hit me again." Seeing that Robert wanted to give him another blow, the young man quickly covered the swollen left side of his face and replied, "Isn't this good? Okay, tell me where the Majin base stationed in Han is." Robert waved his hand as he spoke, which frightened the man again. The young man quickly took out his mobile phone and opened the navigation to introduce him. "Just walk 300 meters north from here, and then east." How about saying Hanran deserves a beating? Robert now truly felt that whoever could defeat them would be able to ride on their head. "Okay, give me your phone, and I'll find someone to take it back to you later." But Robert didn't intend to ride on the other person's head. He didn't have that hobby, so he grabbed the phone directly and walked away. "Then when will you pay it back? Do you know my address?" The young man didn't dare to have the courage until Robert had gone far away, and asked weakly from behind, but in the end his question did not receive a positive response from Robert. After all, Robert didn't even hear the young man's words clearly, so of course he couldn't answer him. Go ahead to the left." Robert followed the navigation all the way. Even though it was somewhat difficult for him to obtain information due to the poor text on his phone, he could still simply look at pictures. "If I had known earlier, I would have called that acting President Anthony to get the exact location. When will it be the end of this journey now?" Since Robert didn't understand Hanwen, he didn't dare to use the mobile phone app to check the total distance. Even if he accidentally clicked on the wrong destination, it was not impossible to change the destination. "If we can't make it to the last 100 meters, I'll call Anthony." Looking at the seemingly endless guidelines on his mobile phone, Robert, who had already hiked several kilometers, became impatient. He felt that it was a waste of time. As a result, he only took a few steps forward when he saw, after crossing a slope, a police car and a group of people holding something similar to placards appeared behind him. "Oppose Thad. Thad, get out of the cold country. We don't want to become victims of war. Mei-jun, get out of Han country." A large group of Han people were protesting there, and Robert saw the outline of a base appearing a few hundred meters in front of them. It must have been the base for the garrison and Mei forces. "Sir, what do you think of the Mei army's deployment of Thad in the cold country?" Robert was looking at the crowd of demonstrators, trying to break through the defense line formed by the police cars, which were also Han nationals. Unexpectedly, before the excitement was over, a tube-like object was stretched out to his mouth. "What do you do?" He just wanted to curse, but when Robert saw the face of the person in front of him clearly, he couldn't help but swallow the words back in his mouth. "What do you do? Are you so beautiful? What kind of scenery is in front of you?" Danfang now has a cute three-dimensional nose, and her face is just decorated with light makeup, which is basically vulgar and looks more energetic. Robert didn't know if this face had ever used the Hangwo disguise, one of the 4 major evil arts in Asia, but he didn't care about that now. So what if you have plastic surgery? If you are so beautiful, you must be a good person. Even before he knew her, Robert was already making excuses for some of her shortcomings in his mind. This is a very warm-hearted behavior. Sir, the female reporter just called Robert softly at first, but after seeing no response from him, she couldn't help but increase her voice. To be honest, she actually regretted coming to interview Robert. If the demonstrators over there were not in a state of chaos, she would have stayed away from a nymphomaniac like Robert for fear of accidentally hurting herself. It's true that in the eyes of female reporters, Robert has been labeled as a nymphomaniac, which makes him lose a lot of points in people's hearts even though he has a foreign face. After all, there are only a minority of women who like men to be submissive to them. Most of them actually prefer domineering men. Hey, what are you asking? Robert, who had no idea that he had been looked down upon by the female reporter, straightened up his appearance. What he didn't know was that this was another negative point in the eyes of the female reporter. If you care too much about your performance in front of women, you won't be a domineering person at first glance, and I'm afraid it will be difficult to achieve anything in the future. In just such a short moment, the first image of Robert appeared in the female reporter's mind. She was worthy of doing this. Sir, what I'm asking is, what do you think of the May Army's deployment of THAAD in the cold this time? But no matter how low Robert's score was in her heart, she still kept smiling and asking questions. THAAD, is that the so-called air defense system? Robert turned his back on the guest and actually asked the female reporter questions. Those who didn't know what he looked like thought he was playing tricks on someone else. Zaiba, I met a fool. The female reporter muttered something in Korean, and then she didn't bother to pay attention to the confused Robert, but said directly to the photographer behind her. Put this section off, let's go and find others to ask. Obviously the female reporter took Robert's words as a joke. After all, in normal people's minds, the deployment of the THAAD system has been going on for several months. Anyone who has lived in the cold country must know it. But Robert really didn't know. After all, the United States had never publicized this topic in the country. This person doesn't seem to understand Hanyu. The photographer carried the camera and was about to leave. Before leaving, he glanced at Robert and said, Female reporter, there must be something wrong with this person. He stares at me as soon as I get close. He is either a pervert or a fool. In fact, she also discovered that Robert didn't understand Hanyu, so she simply laughed at him in front of the other person. People who didn't understand the language might see the other person smiling and think that they were complimenting themselves. Hey, wait, tell me clearly, what's going on with THAAD? After making fun of each other in public, the two wanted to leave. Robert was not happy when he saw it. The other party hadn't made it clear about that yet. While talking, Robert took a few steps to catch up with the reporter and photographer, but the other party seemed a little disgusted and continued to communicate with him. Photographer, are you annoyed? You acted like a fool when we interviewed you, and now you come here to pretend. Do you think we men from the cold country are easy to bully? He yelled at Robert, but he used cold language, but although he couldn't understand it, it didn't prevent the threat and malice from being conveyed. What did you say? Bang. Facing this cameraman who was spitting on him wildly, Robert could not tolerate him. He raised his hand and lifted the cameraman up, causing the expensive photography equipment to fall to the ground. The female reporter covered her mouth and screamed. She didn't know whether it was because of the photography equipment on the ground, or because she was surprised by Robert's sudden attack. I said you were a fool. He blurted out fluent English, and he didn't know if it was because of the invisible colonization for a long time that most people in Han country now knew English. The photographer now feels extremely angry. In fact, he has been secretly in love with the female reporter behind him for a long time, but he just didn't dare to confess. Normally, he had been very careful to maintain his image in the eyes of the other person, but Robert suddenly mentioned him like a rabbit, which made him feel that his face was damaged in front of the person he liked, so he couldn't help but say bad words to the other person. Let me down quickly. Seeing Robert stunned after being scolded by him, he thought he was afraid of his photographer and punched him in the air. The target is aimed directly at Robert's face. Click. Ah, the sound of broken bones sounded. Following the sound, I saw that the hand that the photographer had just hit Robert had been twisted out of shape. Bang! Ah! At this time, he was sweating profusely on his head, and the severe pain almost made him feel like he would faint in the next second, but Robert suddenly threw him heavily to the ground, causing the photographer to wake up instantly. Ah, come on, police, there are thugs here. The female reporter not far away shouted directly. After seeing Robert lift the photographer, she already realized something was wrong. After all, he was a 200-pound fat man. Can a normal person lift it up? The female reporter was still rational at the time, so while observing Robert, she quietly approached the police who were organizing the demonstration crowd. Ah, what's going on? What is this little girl calling? It seems that the foreigner hit us. The female reporter's shout successfully attracted the attention of the police and demonstrators. They stopped pushing and turned their attention to Robert. Almost everyone's eyes were attracted. After all, the man lying upside down on the ground with his hands tied in a knot was really eye-catching. Ah, it's so scary. There were many women among the demonstrators. When they saw this scene, they couldn't help but scream in surprise and then turned their heads away, not daring to look again. But the men from the Han Kingdom present couldn't bear it anymore. Boy, you are the one who beat our compatriots. Why did he offend you? Enthusiastic people came over to ask about Robert's situation, and they also served him very attentively, as if they were afraid that Robert would run away because of his kindness. Miss, please calm down and explain the matter clearly, okay? At this time, on the other side, the female reporter had already arrived in front of the Hangwo police and accused him of Robert's crimes. But because she was too panicked at the beginning, she couldn't explain clearly. However, now that she was protected by the police, the female reporter was not so nervous, so she quickly stabilized her emotions and then said, "The thing is like this, I was doing an interview just now. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.